Okay, we will reconvene our open session. And can I have someone lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ms. Danielle Langford. Fantastic, thank you. Announcement of action taken in closed section. E1, Government Code Section 54957, Public Employee Discipline, Dismissal, Release, Information Received. E2, Government Section Code 54956.9D2, Pending the Potential Litigation, Information Received. At this time, we need to approval of the agenda. I know there's a revision to the HR certificated recommendations on O2. And then we also will request that Superintendent Luna's comments be moved to information and discussion so that her update this evening can be early in the meeting on the topic of the coronavirus and the plans for Washington Unified.
I'll move.
I second.
Okay. Moved by Vice President Mazzati, seconded by Trustee Wong. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, excellent. Okay, all school and student celebrations will be postponed to future meetings due to the concerns of COVID-19. So with that, we'll move to item K, student and association reports. And
Amira Barnett is
Barnett is not here. So let's go ahead and just go to WSTA report.
Thank you, President, Trustees, Superintendent, and Cabinet. Mike Buse is not with us this week. He's on personal necessity, so I'm filling in for him. Our focus is still on safety, and we are appreciating all the communication and collaboration that we have. We also want to thank Norma Gonzalez for her working with us. Her transparency and her professionalism is very much appreciated. We also want to thank you for your approach of the COVID-19, and the teachers would like for the district to have an aggressive approach and make sure that students and teachers are protected. We've been doing a lot of site visits, and it's been really enlightening. We've been talking to our teachers, asking them what would it take to stay a career educator in Washington Unified, and we've heard some really good feedback. The biggest thing is student support services is what teachers are asking for. And there was one that was kind of repeated by a lot of people. And I'm just going to plant the seed so that you guys can think about it. One suggestion was that seems to be universal is to use the coaching positions that are being used right now to help students instead of the teachers. Being able to pull students out and be able to work on them one-on-one, de-escalating them, giving them the nurturing that they need. And so that is something that it seems to be at all of the different sites. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. CSEA report.
Good evening, Board, Superintendent. My update is I just want to thank the superintendent and HR for working with us and having an open door policy during this time. And our communication is good. Also, we're working on something for the classified staff in the event of this goes further. And I know we'll come to an agreement soon. So that's my update. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, members of the public may address the board on topics of our board agenda, in addition to topics that are under the jurisdiction of the board and not on the agenda. Although the board by law may not take action at this meeting, the board may limit the total time for public input on any topic to 20 minutes, unless it chooses to waive the item limit for a particular item. Individual speakers may be limited to 3 minutes to comment on any topic. Public comments consisting of individual charges, complaints, or derogatory remarks about any direct district employee are requested to be submitted in writing to the administration in accordance with the district's complaint procedure. We do recognize that for a lot of people commenting before the board and the audience and the people watching at home on television is a nerve-wracking experience. So, to try to make that as easy as possible, we do ask that there not be any applause or booing or catcalling or other demonstrations to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. The board respects the rights of members of the public to speak to us regarding matters on the agenda and other matters within the jurisdiction of the board. However, it is important for members of the public to recognize that comments regarding students other than the speaker's own children made during a public board meeting may be legally actionable as a violation of student privacy. Both state and federal law prohibit the board and others from discussing confidential student information in open session. To this end, be advised that if you reference a student's name other than your own student, you will be out of order and your comments may not be protected by the privileges that protect public speech. You could be fined liable for such comments in legal proceedings. Furthermore, it's important for the public to understand that negative or derogatory comments made against district employees or others, even those made in a public board meeting, may be actionable civil defamation. As such, the board reminds the public that the district has existing board policy that allows the public to lodge a complaint against district employees. This policy provides a comprehensive procedure for reviewing and responding to public complaints. This process provides a more thorough opportunity to be heard than is allowed under the open meeting law that governs this meeting. And before we get to public comments, I just would like to remind everyone to please be cognizant of the time. And with that, we will start with Miss Maria Garcia, please.
Hola, buenas tardes. Básicamente es lo mismo que hemos estado hablando. Soy una madre preocupada por la seguridad de las escuelas. La seguridad del comportamiento, la disciplina, las consecuencias a nuestros hijos juegan un papel muy importante en las escuelas. Poco personal. Necesitamos más empleados al cuidado de nuestros hijos. Si continuamos así como hasta ahora en las escuelas, nuestros hijos están aprendiendo que están por encima de la ley y es el mensaje que nosotros estamos enviándoles. Nuestros maestros están estresados, frustrados, necesitan ayuda del personal capacitado. Con el paso de los años he mirado cómo los maestros año tras año se van de nuestras escuelas, maestros extraordinarios que buscando mejor apoyo y un mejor ambiente de trabajo se están yendo. He oído miles de veces sobre el bullying en las escuelas y he llegado a la conclusión que se necesita más personal en las escuelas capacitado, no solo a los empleados, también a los sustitutos. Necesitamos entrenamiento a todos los sustitutos, un pago bueno para poder tener más personal disponible, horas continuas de trabajo no separadas, para así nuestros hijos no tengan mal disciplina en las escuelas y tengan seguridad y nuestros maestros se sientan apoyados. Comunicación con los padres continuamente sobre lo que pasa en las escuelas. Hacer que los padres se sientan bienvenidos a nuestras escuelas para poder participar en eventos de las escuelas. Y necesitamos respuestas.
Hello again, my name is Jose Garcia, I'm Maria's husband. And just a quick translation again, it's basically the same stuff that we've been kind of talking about, just security at the schools, the understaff for the supervision of students. And we really appreciate, we've had the opportunity to talk to some of the district officials about these issues. But my wife just wants to kind of, she wants to see if we can, at one point or another, from the board, just get kind of some answers just to see what's been done. I know with the different people that we've talked to, they've listened and they've made some. They've just listened basically, but we haven't really had a response as far as what is going to get done. It's the same issues as far as making sure that security and safety becomes an issue at the schools, and that the teachers have the support that they need, so that they don't get frustrated and they don't get to the point where they leave the district. So we want to make sure that we maintain good teachers here, and one of the ways that we can do that is by making sure that we support them with the trained staff and the substitutes that need to be there when some of the regular staff members are not able to be there. So that's it's a continuing problem, and in a future meeting like this, we would like to see if maybe there's a response to some of the things we've been saying, because we're just kind of sound like a broken record. And again, it's not on you, it's not on the teachers. Just again, I think we need more staff, more people to be present, so the kids don't feel like they're, as my wife is saying, kind of above the law, and then we end up with all kinds of future problems, homelessness, and student and people that are not being prepared for the future. So that's pretty much all we have to say. Thank you. And my wife also provided for you a list of the petition that she's gotten parents to sign the petition, that they're also concerned. So it's not just us. My wife is working actively to talk to parents and to get them to see that we need this, and to kind of put pressure on the district to go ahead and hire more people, maybe raise the rates of pay for different substitutes or employees or whatever, just to kind of keep people and pull some good employees into the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Annie Chisholm. All right.
Thank you. Just the presentation brought to mind something else, so I was trying to add another comment, but I'll stick to my original one. So I'm here to speak about the COVID-19 concern. I'm a teacher at Riverbank Elementary, and I appreciate all the communication that the district has been communicating with the community at large, as well as with teachers. I do have to say that I'm concerned, though, just because of the escalation of what's happening in the world, as well as in our corner of the world and the United States. We were given, and I understand that WSD is doing all that they can. There's a limit of hand sanitizers, but we were given an 8-ounce bottle of hand sanitizer that meets the CDC criteria. That isn't enough for what we have coming through our classroom. I'm a middle school teacher, so I have about 155 student contacts a day. And what's in my dispenser in my room has 0 alcohol in it. So it's essentially not doing anything and killing any bacteria. I appreciate the social distancing and the actions that we've taken for our staff meetings so that we can kind of limit that. But a lot of the teachers are wondering, okay, so what happens when we're in the classroom? I'm in a small portable, and there can be 36 people in there, or sometimes I'll have visiting students from other classrooms. There's no way to do social distancing in that case. And I'm concerned for the students, and as you know, that they're not likely to get as sick. I'm very concerned about the fact that they can be the carriers. They are not known to do really good hand washing. And when they don't have access to the proper hand sanitizer, because they use the sanitizers that are in the classroom, but since they're not doing what they need to do, they are really potential to spread. They do, I don't know if you guys know, I know some of your teachers, waterfalls, with the drink still. You try to talk to them, and it's a concern because we have a population that works in the district that is in that category that is at higher risk. We also have students and faculty, teachers, CSEA members that also have underlying conditions that put them at risk as well. And the other concern is we've had students that have had to go to the office because they have a temperature, they go home. But how do we know what's going on? We know that there's only one verified case, but since there's so many test kits that aren't here, and then they don't have the reagents to actually process them, do we actually know if we have members that have it? The likelihood is that we most likely do. If you look at what's going on in the country, we have San Francisco Unified closing down their school district. Governor Newsom is making a recommendation to districts to consider it. He's not willing to make that call yet. And I think it's a hard call to make because we have a lot of students that rely on the meals. It's a big thing to decide, but I think to take that decision seriously and consider that, because we're in our classrooms constantly wondering when is it going to happen. We're handling papers with
That's the time.
Okay, lots of stuff. So I'd just like you guys to take that consideration, please.
Ms. Daniel Langford.
Good evening. For Ruth, I'm not supposed to lick the microphone or anything. A little comedy relief. I just want to say I am frustrated over the special emergency board meeting that was held on Tuesday. It's my understanding in a staff meeting on Monday, they were told that there would be a special board meeting Tuesday. Therefore, why was it not posted Monday night or early Tuesday morning versus at 3:50, an hour and 10 minutes prior to it starting? Is it because you don't want community members and parents there? I know parents that called me asking me questions about it, and I'm like, I have no idea. I'm seeing the same thing you are. I'm fully aware of the capacity of being able to do an agenda in less than 24 hours. I'm fully aware of all of that. But it's the perception and the frustration. We all know there's a frenzy going on. We all know people are panicked because it's just such a scary thing. And the communication I'm hearing from parents is not coming out as well as they'd like, and they're very concerned. At the last meeting 2 weeks ago, I stood here along with another parent, and even Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez requested about alcohol-based hand sanitizer being available in every classroom and every workstation. And it's my understanding from some parents from 3 different campuses that I know of that did not have it for over a week. That's just not going to cut it in this situation. The new social distancing, which is probably going to be the new buzzword. What are we trying to do with buses? Do we cram 80 kids on a bus? There's no social distancing there, and that's a big petri dish. Why are intramural sports staying when we're canceling high school sports? Because any sports, you don't have social distancing. It just doesn't happen. What about the cafeteria? Are we utilizing this beautiful weather to maybe seat some of the kids outside? What communications are being sent out? We cannot rely on digital only. Some parents don't have that capability. Quite frankly, we send out hard copies for different events, and I would say this is a pretty major event. I would think that a hard copy would be going in every student's backpack or hand to be taken home. I have nieces and nephews in this district. Many of you don't know who they are for a reason, but I know the communication that they're not getting, because they're calling me, asking me for it. Whether you like me or not doesn't really matter. I just wish you'd listen and take the history and knowledge. Glassy-eyed stares, doing things, talking amongst each other, rolling your eyes, or whatever goes on, the disrespect is not okay. Being snarked at or swiped at by you guys during board comments or the superintendent during superintendent comments is not okay, because you don't like who I am or what I'm asking. If questions got answered, there wouldn't be an issue.
That's the time.
Okay. So honestly, please direct staff to answer questions or get back to us. That would cause a whole lot of less problem. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Annie, you're up again. Yes.
So, thank you. I'm from Riverbank Elementary, and I just wanted to add some comments because the Garcias were up here speaking, and I know they've been here a lot. I wanted to talk about this substitute issue. I know we already had that issue, and we tried to do a hiring thing to bring substitutes, and unfortunately, at Riverbank, almost every single one has told us they're refusing to come back. We have substitutes that have left in the middle of the class, 4th period, because they feel unsupported and unsafe. So as teachers, we're really frustrated because we also sometimes feel unsupported, and we're dealing with some extreme behaviors, and it's really hard to teach a math lesson, let alone try to navigate what's going on in the classroom. But especially because I'm on the negotiation team, so I'm meeting with Norma, and that's been a wonderful process, but I dread any time I have to take my time out, whether it's I'm sick, whether it's for off-site meetings, because I'm worried about the students that are in my classroom that have anxiety. A lot of my students have trauma, and it's the quiet ones I worry about. And I always get kids coming, I'm like, Mrs. Chisholm, you don't know how bad it was. There are always kids coming and reporting to me how terrible it was, and I feel so bad, and it breaks my heart. And then also to have a person that's willing to step into a substitute's shoes, which is such a hard job, to be treated the way that they're being treated, and nothing being done with the students that have been notoriously doing this over and over, and they have a notch on their belt. There's another sub that's not coming back. It's like a mission. I don't know what to do about it. We've tried to talk to our kids, teach them the proper way of behaving. They know. I'm an 8th grade teacher. They know what's expected of them in the classroom. We're not talking about kids that forget to raise their hand to answer a question. We're talking about extreme behaviors. I'm coming back with broken chairs, things thrown up into the ceiling, stolen items, all kinds of things, not to mention the language that happens in the classroom. And so something needs to be done, because we're trying to deal with our sub shortage, and we're getting subs, but it's not what they're getting. The pay or whatever, I don't even think if the pay was higher, I don't know if they'd still come back. We need to figure out something so that we can keep subs, and so I can feel like if I'm sick, I don't have to worry about what happens. But it's a serious issue.
Okay, thank you. Okay, public hearing. There is no public hearing at this meeting. Information discussion items, superintendent comments.
Thank you, President Jackson, Board of Trustees, staff, and guests. And thank you for allowing the time earlier in the meeting to give this update in regards to the coronavirus. Before I begin, I just wanted, because this is my comment time, to thank the comments in regards to the substitute shortage, as we do acknowledge we are short on substitutes. And so what we will do is revisit again how short we have been since we instituted an increase in pay in substitutes and address that. And we do realize that we are. And we encourage anybody to please apply, and we will get through that process as quickly as possible. So in the beginning here, we want to start with the statement that our schools remain open. As of March 12th, today at 4 o'clock, we have no confirmed cases of students or staff members in WUSD with the COVID-19 virus. And I'm making that statement because there are being posts on social media that there are students identified with such a virus. As of this time, there are none. There are none. We've also received information that schools are closed. Our schools are not closed. And so we want to make that very, very clear to our public. In addition, in regards to who we're collaborating with, I want to first thank the board for meeting in the emergency meeting. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago? I can't even keep that straight. We've been working so many hours each day at my request. And the board can do that. The board can hold an emergency meeting after it actually takes action that there is an existence of a need for an emergency. The board took action at this emergency meeting under Government Code Section 54956.5, which, under the language of severely impairs public health, safety, or both, as determined by the majority or of the members of the legislative body. We will post these minutes in draft form as required by this government code. And the emergency is every single half day, information has changed guidelines change every 6 hours to implement regarding the coronavirus. The board must post an agenda whenever you're going to sit and talk together. So it was an emergency, and I thank the board for coming together for that, for we don't want to make decisions without the board's understanding and the board's direction. And we also want to make sure that you have the information from the California Department of Public Health, the Yolo County Public Health Officer, Dr. Chapman, and our Yolo County Office of Education. So that said, what we know currently is the expectation to see a rise in positive test results because we're actually testing. So currently there are 8,000 tests for the coronavirus that were given to California to be administered. There has been a request of an additional 12,000. So it makes logical sense that because people are actually getting tested now, we may see more numbers rise. But again, I would say and repeat that we have no students identified or staff members with this particular virus. So there are guidelines that we have undertaken, not on our own accord. All guidelines are given to us by Yolo County Public Health, California Department of Public Health, and our County Office of Education. Then we, as school districts, then implement what these guidelines look like for our district. Here's what we've done so far. And this is what has been communicated to staff and to our public. We've addressed our safety plans. Every single school, based on the WSTA contract language, is to have a safety committee of the staff members of each school site. Second bullet there is that we have identified a sick room at every single school office so that if a child has demonstrated any of the flu symptoms, they are being sent to the office for parents or the guardians to pick up, and while waiting, they are sitting in the sick room. We've even gone to the next level of having masks available if the school wanted to for the sick room. We've also taught etiquette in terms of coughing, sneezing. We want to do that into our sleeves, and that's across the nation. We've heard a lot about hand sanitizers, and the clarification on that we've been given is that the first and foremost prevention is going to be hand washing of soap, which is why our MOT department has determined that our custodians are going to have to change their daily routine to let other things go, such as vacuuming, in order to make sure that all of our soap dispensers in the classroom and in the bathrooms are full every single day. Hand washing is the number one preventative measure. What the public health officer says that if you're not around to wash your hands, then of course hand sanitizers is the second best practice for prevention and of risk of the disease. We are trying to teach about avoid touching. I have that problem. It's allergy season. We all have sniffles and we scratch our eyes because it's itchy eye time during allergies. And so it's going to take all of us to help with this. We've already instituted no physical contact. That means even in athletics or even just in greeting our students, when sometimes teachers greet their kids coming into the classroom, which we just taught in PBIS, right, about how to make connections with our kids. So we are at a no physical contact at this point. Our custodial crews, I mentioned, have changed their daily routine because this is an important and priority time for them. They are ensuring that every night they are wiping down every tabletop, ensuring soap in the dispensers. Hand sanitizers, I don't know a person who can get one, although I saw a post on my personal Facebook that if you go to a Dollar Tree or Dollar General, they might actually have them. But in terms of mass quantities, everybody is back ordered, so we're doing our best to get those in place. And lastly, on the communications, the most important thing is consistency. We are not going to veer from that. We're not making up this language. We're cutting and pasting based on the California Department of Public Health, our Yolo County Public Health, and our Yolo County Office of Education. So we are streamlining all of our communications based on that. And we've heard a few suggestions in regards to hard copies, so we will consider that. The question is do we have the manpower to do that? But we want to make sure. What we are instituting is in every office, and we're making these, is to have a display so that any parent or any person coming onto the campus can actually take hard copies of every communication that we post. And it will be just left there, and then the new one will just be posted on top of it, and it will also have hard copies of translations. In terms of our common messaging, there have been changes already. Just this week, there's been many changes. So here are the most recent changes that we are aware of today. We had heard the common practice of changing certain events, canceling certain events until March 31st. And actually, the information we sent out in terms of all those guidelines that are listed there from Yolo County have changed, not to March 31st, but they are extending all of these guidelines to be implemented until April 30th. So that is the new change. So in terms of why are we doing this? Why are we implementing guidelines instead of just closing schools? Well, the California Department of Public Health has given guidelines of when would you shut down a school? When would you do that? And we're going to follow those guidelines. We're going to follow them because otherwise we cause panic. And we need consistency for many of our families, and school is our consistent factor in many families' lives. At the same time, safety is the highest priority. So the reason why we're putting in guidelines, the reason why we're putting in restrictions is because we want to reduce the risk of infection. There is no cure for this virus. There is no cure. So the only way to plateau this virus, as China has already done, plateau it and let it subside, especially with the heat now and the climate change, is to do preventative measures, and it takes all of us to do that. The second thing is not only are we putting in guidelines just for our students and our staff, but really, again, the most vulnerable, and we heard a comment about that. Many of us, staff members, us, qualify under that vulnerable subgroup. And so we also want to make sure it's just not about our district, it's about our community outside of us as well. Thirdly, we want to create balance, again, mentioning that school, for many of our families, is consistency. So we want to have a balance of that and still keeping safety at the highest level of priority. So here are some new guidelines that have been put in place that I think are important for us to know. The first is regarding people who are sick. Originally, when the virus came out, it was an immediate 14-day quarantine if you were sick, whether you had the virus or not. You could have had the flu, you could have had a really bad cold, and immediately the guideline was 14 days of self-quarantine at home. Well, the public health at this point of the actual virus itself, the quarantine is not enough. So now we're moving into a whole nother level. What they're saying is anybody who is sick, of course, should stay home. Now, that's easier said than done. But anybody who is sick needs to stay home. The difference now is that when they're sick and they're at home, what the public health is asking is an additional 72 hours after your symptoms have gone away, that you stay home for an additional 72 hours. Or 7 days from the day that you got sick and had the first symptoms, the 7th day, and you still have no symptoms, that's good too. The second change in regards to sick persons from public health is that even people with cold-like symptoms should manage their symptoms at home. So basically what they're saying in a nutshell, if you're sick, please stay home, because that's going to be the best preventative measure to reduce the spread of this disease. Another new change that has come out this week is about people who have been exposed or think they have been exposed to the virus. Originally, when the virus came out, if people had thought that if you were exposed to the virus or were around people with it, they were quarantined for 14 days, and we saw that on a cruise ship. It's no longer at that point of helping. What's going to help is not so much the quarantine for 14 days. What's going to help now is the community's efforts to implement these guidelines. So it's no longer necessary to quarantine for 14 days if you have been around somebody who's identified with the virus. So if the person standing next to me has tested positively for the virus, it is not required for me to be quarantined for 14 days at home. That is no longer in place under public health. What they're asking is, because I've been exposed next to a person who has the virus, is that I self-monitor. And if I get any symptoms or I start to not feel well, I immediately institute staying home and waiting the 72 hours after my symptoms are gone. So that is a huge change that public health has now put out. The additional measure that public health in Yolo County and our Yolo County Office of Education is now instituting, along with all school districts in Yolo County, is social distancing. And it is the new word. I didn't even hear about that before until this new guideline came out. Social distancing is about space because, according to public health and the health experts, it's not airborne. It is, however, spread through our cough and our sneezes if you have the virus. So space is what they're saying will reduce this risk, which is what we're doing tonight. As you can see in the audience, we have done social distancing. So knowing that, this is what it looks like in terms of Washington Unified, what social distancing is. No traveling or field trips outside of Washington Unified at this time. And the purpose for that is because we already know our kids. We already have our kids. They're in our classrooms all day. Now, they have not talked about social distancing of students. What they're talking about is social distancing of adults and exposure. So what we're doing is canceling or postponing all field trips and all travel outside of Washington Unified School District until April 30th, at which point public health will reassess the level of risk of the coronavirus. The second one I would like to spend a few minutes talking about, and that's our athletics and visual and performing arts performances. See, it's not about Washington Unified School District because we have no students or citizens as of yet identified. What we're trying to protect is it coming in from outside schools, from visitors outside of West Sacramento coming to these events. When we do athletics, intramural in terms of high school, we have not stopped those. We have not canceled our athletics. What we're doing is trying to institute these particular indoors and outdoors kind of practices, and that's a huge effort in order for that to happen. But the question we have to answer in terms of our athletics, today we saw 3 professional leagues cancel all of their athletic events. NCAA has postponed all of their collegiate events in sports just to take pause. So while we want normalcy, we want as best as possible to keep our kids in their activities. The question is are we comfortable sending our students outside of Washington Unified to other schools that they do have citizens or students identified with the virus? It's a field trip. And so we've canceled field trips, we've canceled trainings, We can limit the VAPA performances by social distancing. That's easier than athletics because they're not going to do competitions against other schools. It's the athletics of integrating with other schools and other cities and other counties. So I'm going to pause here because this seems to be the area of the most gray of what we really need to do as Washington Unified, and we welcome your guidance.
Well, I will just interject something. As we know, this is a very fluid situation with it literally changing by the minute, as I was just notified that beginning Monday, the schools, Sac City will be closed. Beginning Monday through next Wednesday. So as you can tell, it's a very fluid situation that can change on a moment's notice, because as of 2 o'clock today when I left work, there was no intention on closing the schools in Sac City, but now apparently we're closing the schools for 3 days of next week.
All schools?
All schools. So I think it's something that we just should be aware of. Yeah, why 3 days? I have no idea, but that's what they're doing. So this is a very fluid situation that, as we can tell, can change on a moment's notice. One question that I did have is that I know that there's been some concerns that I had as far as the sick rooms. If a student is placed into one of those sick rooms, how's once they leave that room, how is that being cleaned or disinfected, or is it being cleaned and disinfected once a student leaves that room?
If a student is actually, and I don't have any data of whether or not kids actually have been placed in the sick room since we instituted this week, we would want, if there's one student there, we would want the custodian to go in and sanitize.
Okay.
We're not even using the word clean, we're using sanitize because we're using an approved chemical for cleaning, to sanitize and disinfect. So I will follow up on that and make sure that that is happening.
Okay. And then one other thing too was that, and this is the topic that I've seen that come up as well, that I've also had some questions about too, is that has there been any indication in terms from the Department of Health as far as the temperature of the water that needs to be used when kids are washing their hands?
No, actually there's been no word about that it has to be hot water or anything like that. It's just soap and water is what they say.
Okay.
Yeah, soap and water.
Okay.
Soap for 20 seconds, and then rinse it off with water.
Okay, so water. So the fact that there's probably not hot water in every single one of our bathrooms is not an issue.
The district office has absolutely no hot water whatsoever. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay.
They have not said that, but we will I can definitely pose that question to public health.
Okay, great, thank you. Trustee Alcala?
I have 3 questions, Superintendent Luna. First is someone brought up the cafeterias. There was a recommendation made that during good weather, maybe we have children out in the yards.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's great.
Okay, but I believe someone mentioned, maybe some board member mentioned that there may be rain next week.
Yes, so we will, we're going to have some conversations about the lunchtime, what the possibilities are. I would say that kids would probably rather eat outside than inside the confines of a cafeteria. Supervision, is a concern during lunchtime. It's noon duty supervision that we've been lacking. So we will have to, before this happens, we need to make sure that we have enough supervision at all of our school sites in order for that to happen. We also need to teach. Before we do a change like that, it needs to be taught. The expectations of the garbage and the manner in which we behave and the expectations of our self-monitoring as students, right? So we will definitely have the discussions and put action plans in place. We just need to make sure there's safeguards in there.
There was also concern about the buses. How are we sanitizing them?
Thank you for asking that. Our transportation department, as soon as we started the sanitizing and disinfecting at our schools, it has been with transportation. So it is actually a part of the duties of transportation department that they wipe down the rails, that the students hold on to. It is a part of their daily duties. That's what I have been assured of.
And the wonderful presentation that you had, is it possible to have it sent out to all the students in written form, in Spanish and any other language that we normally do, so the parents are aware of what the guidelines are?
Yeah, actually, this is exactly what our communications have been. So I'm cutting and pasting from our actual communications that were sent out the past 2 days, and then today was a new information sent
So
out.
that will go out to all grade levels, not just the lower grade levels all the way through high school?
Are you talking about hard copies?
Yes, hard copies.
We will look into hard copies.
I would recommend that because I know a lot of families, at least in some of the schools, don't have access to computers.
Vice President Posadi?
Yeah. So in the Capitol where we work, there's this statue of a bear right out in front of the governor's office. And today they put out a sign that said, please do not, yesterday, I saw it today. It said, please do not touch the bear. And the reason why we do that, or they did that, is because that bear is affectionately known as bacteria bear. And so I'm using this to segue into something else that is, I think, probably often overlooked, but probably the area in which our kids probably would find the most amount of bacteria, and that is on the playgrounds, on the jungle gyms. How do we go about ensuring that those are cleaned? At least maybe with a solution, or spray them down, or power wash them once in a while. I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah, Terry Souza, our director of MOT, is on it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and then have we been in contact, now I'm going to turn to athletics, have we been in contact with the Metro Athletic League? Because the Metro Athletic League is who we compete with. Now, having heard that SAC Unified is going to shut down for 3 days, I don't know what they're doing in terms of their athletic teams and how that's going to impact them. But in terms of athletics, if we could get the league itself, while I know CIF will do its own thing and come down with recommendations, if we could get all on the same page with the league in terms of how we decide to collectively address the situation, be it, players and coaches and refs only, or do we do social distancing? But as long as we're all on the same page, I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. It's really about being on the same page. So the reason why we can implement all of these guidelines, with the exception of athletics, is because we can control that within our county. In other words, all 5 school districts, Woodland, Esparto, Winters, and Davis, and Washington Unified, have all agreed that we will implement these guidelines across our county. Once we step out of our county, there's no guarantee, because school districts in other counties are implementing guidelines and interpreting public health in a totally different manner, and their public health officer may be having a different take, such as Sacramento County. They're saying 250 equals a mass gathering. Yolo County Public Health will not give a number, because in his expertise and advice, it's not about the number of people. It's about the space in between each person that will reduce the risk. You could still get it with 5 people versus 250 people. So because we're part of Yolo County, that's where I'm trying to do our part of implementing this as a larger community. We will definitely reach out to the Metro League. CIF will not be meeting until Tuesday, and I think that's deliberate, because every single day something is changing. And as all of these professional ball players are not taking part in their athletics, CIF is just waiting for more and more. I'm sure of it. I'm happy to say that on the microphone.
Well,
That, they're waiting until it's time to say, we're going to take pause.
and I agree, but the difference between a collegiate athlete or or even a high school athlete and a professional athlete is professionals play for the fans effectively because they can't generate a revenue without a fan base. They're a business. This is not a business.
Right.
This is, a pathway for many kids to get into college. And if they can't continue to play, then other colleges may not be able to see them play and offer them scholarships. And that is something that is, very important to us, as we were supposed to have a signing or
Right.
recognition tonight of two of our student athletes that got accepted to play, one at West Point and the other at Dixie State. So I think it's, important to understand that this is part of that. And our athletes do utilize this as a source of getting into college. So anyway, it just something that I was thinking about. I think I had another question, but I'll pass it off. I might have it come back to me.
Thank you. I want to appreciate too the time that we had together this week to go over the procedures right when they came out. Emergency meetings they're hard and we all work up here. And so just nailing down a time when we can get together is incredibly challenging last minute. So I want to thank my colleagues up here. It was good to go over that because I feel like the communications that have gone out have been really helpful and ongoing. And when you look over at some other districts, they've not had a lot of communication this past week. They've been sort of on hold, and they haven't had emergency board meetings. They've been sort of on hold. And so it seems like as we look at some of these, just preliminary, but I know that every day things are changing, that some of our neighboring districts that have announced that they would have some days closed, it's to establish procedures, protocols, do some cleaning. And so I want to really thank everybody for having these ongoing conversations and being ready to have another one as we need it. I have 3 points to make. So the first one I think is an important one. The communication has been really good that's gone out. And if somebody doesn't have access to that, I think a good way to help that would be if the principals, they call regularly and families opt in of what way they would like to be communicated with. And so if the principal can just remind in that phone call that they do for their communication, whatever that looks like, to go, to get information from the district. And if you need hard copies, they're in the school office. I think that would be helpful because it's changing every day, twice a day, right? And so if we send home a paper, I do worry a little bit that then you think that's the most current paper and then there's another paper. And so it's hard to figure out the best way to do that. But I think if their phone calls can remind people there's a hard copy in the office, that would be helpful for those that don't have other access. 2, a helpful clarification, and you don't need to make this to us now, but if there can be an update for everyone, because we have canceled our outside organizations. We've canceled church groups and Girl Scouts and Brownies coming and all of the outside organizations that come in. I think a communication would be helpful on the organizations that are outside agencies that serve our students after school. So we have, the YMCA Champions, we have ACES, and then we also have other programs like Mad Science, Firefly Art, and Young Rembrandts, where it's one person coming in to serve our kids. And so do those fall into the same category? Do they not? To communicate that with our families, I think is important. And then as you talked about, I appreciated that we had, small bottles of hand sanitizer. But as the supply, we're all tight. This is my baby wipe with alcohol on it because, we're running out of As you know, we've all gone to the stores and it's hard to get the supply. And so I think the communication of, I know when I talk to my girls and other kids around there, they are taking precautions before they go and eat, but making sure that they are taking the time. I know we're teachers, it takes a long time, but to wash their hands if they don't have that sanitizer.
Yeah.
And then the last piece with that, 3, is that we communicate with our the charter schools that are under our purview and make sure we have really good access right away. You're on superintendent conferences and everything else, and so they might not have that same level of access. So that we communicate with them for their level of health for their students and staff as well.
Yeah, they both actually, they just reached out to us. And what we have done is just refer them to all the information, because everything that we have given is all on the website. And then they can take those documents and use them however they need to. They're all public. So we encourage Sac Valley Charter and Lighthouse Charter to just use our documents as needed.
Thank you. I reiterate a lot of what my colleagues have said. I think that the communication, thank you, Yorgos, for kind of putting, just consistent and communication up live. My question is actually, can you just for the edification of the audience and those who are work at home, all the forms of communication thus far that haven't gone out, just forms outside of social media. So you mentioned earlier that there were hard copies of this protocol that was sent home, and
Yeah,
principals
so
have been told.
our goal is to have in every school office all of the communication, hard copies of all the communications that we have sent out. I'm not sure if that is up yet or not. Not yet. And but what we have told all of our leadership is to download hard copies, especially the translated copies, and have them all in the front office so that if anybody walks in, that they have hard copies to give away. And not refer them to websites per se, but just give them the hard copy in the front office.
So all principals should know that. And I also know that we don't necessarily want to talk about it, but a lot of parents have been asking, in the event that something does, a case does show up, what is our protocol? And whether or not we are prepared to support the continuous learning of our students at home.
Yes, so that's the last slide of our presentation tonight. Yeah. So in terms of the,
so what is that protocol?
Well,
I'm glad that that's the last slide.
Well, I think that that is our worst case scenario, so that should be the last slide. Meanwhile, this is what we're doing, and we are instituting a new level right now. And we need to make sure that we're very comfortable with what we're instituting now before we get to the worst case scenario. So,
if you want to wait, I do have another question.
Yeah,
so
okay, that'd be great.
I will wait. And just because this is an issue that is not just contained in Washington Unified School District, can you highlight for the audience what the communication is with other entities, public entities like the City of West Sacramento?
Yeah, thank you for asking that.
We interact with students, with students and families who are not
right
here.
Thank you for asking that question. So we have been in communication with the City of West Sacramento every single day. We meaning myself with Erin Laurel, the city manager, Yorgos Kazanis, our public information officer, with Paul Hosley, the city's public information officer. We also are working with Brian Johnson, the fire marshal, because we want to make sure that all of our local entities are in the decision makers and the policy makers of implementing changes across the city are kept abreast. So every communication that we send to our community, the city manager gets a copy also. Yorgos attended the emergency meeting of the city council that they had in regards to what does the city have in place. And the good news is that Washington Unified has a lot in place. And if you don't see outside of West Sacramento, you wouldn't know that. But being outside of West Sacramento, trust me, Washington Unified has a lot in place and has had for before the virus. So Yorgos was able to share with the city council exactly what we've been doing, what we have in place, the start of our communications, which then brought to the city, yes, I will forward everything to the city manager. So we are in very close communication with them. The county supervisors were also present. I think one was also present at that meeting. So we are all in full joint communication.
Helpful.
And also, our after-school coordinator has been working closely with ensuring that all Kids Zone champions and YMCA have all of our information and are expected to also institute our practices, especially of the basic hand washing, sanitizers, and spacing when they can. The spacing is new, but they're going to be instituting that. So that they're well aware of what's going on as well.
Another question is, can you, for the audience and those watching at home, explain why we are in mitigation phase and possibly the impact to our healthcare system when folks are...
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, so in terms of the mitigation phase of versus quarantine, so there's two reasons. One, the mitigation phase is that quarantine isn't enough, and that we need to be much more preventative and proactive and which is that part of the social spacing and canceling mass events. The second thing about the change in regards to quarantining or getting a doctor's note is because the doctor's offices are so inundated with actually people who are ill, whether they have the virus or not, but other medical conditions, that if we require a person who has been ill at home to go to the doctor and get a note to come back to work or back to school, the doctor's offices just aren't able to handle that. They need to be the ones seeing the most ill people and also giving the tests to those who actually have those symptoms versus, I had a cold, I need a note to get back into school during this time. So that's why they've lifted and changed some of those policies through public health.
So if I'm interpreting, you're saying that those who are at most risk are those who should be tested first.
Those who are at most risk with symptoms of the illness should go to their doctor, to their practitioner, absolutely.
My understanding from the folks in the healthcare world, there are a lot of people showing up at their door, and those who are absolutely compromised in those populations are not getting the tests, and or the tests are being delayed.
Right, and which is why they've changed this practice
or they've
now.
run out of them.
Right, and the other thing I have learned is if you are going to need to go to the doctor because you have these symptoms, that you're supposed to call your doctor first, because the doctor's offices have a certain way of bringing a person who is ill into the office area. I've heard that some are actually getting tested outside versus being brought inside. So the most important thing is if a person has these symptoms, these flu-like symptoms, or they have traveled abroad, or they have been, exposed to somebody with the virus in another setting, that they should call their doctor and get the actual guidelines for how the doctor will receive them in for testing.
Okay, Vice President Posadi.
Yeah, so I finally remembered the question that I was going to
okay.
ask. So I've been in contact from several parents that have either immunocompromised children, or there's people at home with compromised immune system. And they're asking, is there protocols in place for independent study if they decide the risk is too great with so many kids in one place that they just don't want to take the risk? And so I said I would ask, and I would like to know if we have something set up.
We do, in terms of independent study. And it is available to families who are ill or who have a compromised situation. that would be very threatening to them in this time. We would ask any parent who is requesting independent study to meet with the principals, because there are certain things that go with that. So and that's also in our last slide of how
Okay,
we're
I'm
ready, to close, should we get to the worst case scenario of closing school, what we already have in place.
I am
Kirby
wondering
Gonzalez?
if that could go out in the next communication somehow, that this is, that home and hospital or independent study is an option. I know that we'll get to that last slide that we're all eager to see.
So independent study would be that situation that Vice President Pizzotti had just mentioned, in that there is a threat to the student's health at this time. Home hospital, you have to have a doctor's note releasing the student to home hospital, which then allows the district to enter into that. So we do have students on home hospital, they're already in home hospital. Students who feel like they need to go into independent study, they need to meet with their principals. That's a standard procedure anyway, so, yeah. So if I can go back to the athletics and the VAPA performances. So right now, our VAPA performances are being held by social distancing, which means that it limits the number of participants in the audience. So my recommendation or suggestion to our principals is, if you're going to have a band concert, it's probably about 1/3 that you're going to eliminate of the capacity. So you might have to give tickets, and only those with a ticket are able to get in, because it's a certain amount of seating for social spacing. Athletics is a different story, because our visual and performing arts students are not leaving Washington Unified. They're staying home until the lift of these guidelines. Athletics, again, as of right now, there is no lift for them to necessarily go and play like at Sac City. Though the schools are closed for 3 days, I don't know what their guidelines are. I don't know if their guidelines are absolutely no school activities with school closed. We have no idea what their guidelines are. Natomas also announced their closure tomorrow and Monday, so that they can work on procedures and implementation and cleaning. So this is what our county had agreed upon at the time of information. This is before any of the athletics and organizations had canceled all of their events and activities. So that's how quickly information has changed.
I have one more piece and that I thought of as we go through this, and I did stop one of our bus drivers while we were both getting gas, and he was working hard cleaning his bus, and I've been seeing the custodians after school working so hard. So I see everyone working incredibly hard doing this work, but I do think about capacity, and I know in the past when we've had other flu outbreaks, we have paid overtime to staff for cleaning, and I just want to make sure that we have the capacity, that our schools are getting clean in our classrooms, and if we need more, that we do overtime for staff, and we find ways to do that to make sure that everything is getting cleaned as it needs, and as we tell our families and our community.
Yeah, we have put a no stop on overtime right now because of the all hands on deck. In regards to the substitutes, though, I will have to revisit, how do we get more substitutes into our positions that we don't have the substitutes on our WUSD substitute list. They're not accepting the positions. We need to get those filled. And so I will revisit that, and with the data in hand of how it has looked with the virus outbreak, and even before that, since the beginning of the school year. So we will bring that back. Another suggestion, nobody has said it, so I'll go ahead and say it, okay? I will just go ahead and say it. A suggestion that some school districts are actually doing is allowing the students to play. Students, coaches, and referees only, no spectators. Now, we can do that. However, we can't guarantee that other school districts will, because that may not be their protocol or their guideline. When we call all the participants of the Metro League, we will ask what they're willing to do to keep our games going, and then we'll give a written update to the board on that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so the other things that have changed is number 3, the professional learning time on Wednesdays. We are moving to virtual meetings. You would be very proud of me. I really learned all of that yesterday, and it was very successful. It's not the same, right, of the human touch of being together. However, it is very efficient in time, and everybody able to be there present virtually. We are also doing social distancing on Wednesdays as well. We do have a district-wide professional learning time on March 25th, and Director of Professional Learning, Stan Moisage, is working on a plan on that, whether it's going to be virtual or whether we have large locations of facilities that we can do some social distancing. So more to come on that, but that's what we're implementing as of right now. Our school site councils, ELACs, and PTO officer meetings are generally very small, so we're encouraging our principals to keep these meetings. If they're small in participant size, they can do social distancing and still be in connection with the parents in our school site councils and ELAC meetings. However, when we get to things like PTO movie nights, those are mass gatherings, and those are the things that are being canceled. On number 5, we have halted the use of outside organizations using our facilities. So I met with our clergy that use our facilities. After Sunday, it is all done. In terms of sports that are not intramural sports, my highest concern in learning about this is that we have students from Roseville, from Placer County, of which has 7 students identified with the virus within 1 week. And so Placer County students, they come in and use our facilities in some kind of a sports organization. And so we've halted all of that, and people have been getting a hold of people that these activities are done. Number 6, unfortunately, the best parts of our meetings are our student celebrations and our staff celebrations. I'm not saying that we're canceling them. I'm going to say we're going to postpone it. And if things are better in May, I say we have a special meeting and just have a night of celebration and nothing else. I would love that. I think our staff would deserve that, and so do our students. So there's more to come on that one. Number 7, again, we're talking about all the gatherings, which is the hardest. This is the hardest one because a lot of families have invested so many hours of time, of planning, even resources to try to host community events at our schools. And what I'm telling our principals is perhaps in May, at the end of May, things will be different. It'll be hotter. And if we all practice this as a community, we will see, according to the research, we will see a plateau eventually. And if we can get to that point, it's not that we're completely eliminating all of these gatherings, but perhaps we can just have them postponed. And these are the best practices that we are now very specifically implementing in our district. Okay, this is the last slide. Okay, so, and I'm resisting, talking about closure of schools because we have so many stories that are inaccurate about our schools being closed. They are not. The guidelines under public health do not even call for closing of schools until you have multiple identifications of students or staff members with the actual virus. They have tested positive. We have not one yet in our city or in our district, but we are prepared. We are prepared should this happen. 1, our communications for the plan of actions will be revealed to all of our parents of exactly how they can access all of the materials and what they need. We will be doing for fourth bullet there, instructional materials and lessons for 10 days, those are already being prepared. Our principals have been working on that with lead teachers or teachers who are willing to work on this to prepare for every grade level, every content area, kindergarten through grade 12, to prepare for 10 days of lessons. Now, that's going to look different for all the different grade levels and content areas. The reason why colleges can close is because they do distant learning. The reason why colleges can close is because every college student has a computer. Every college student communicates with their professors through email or through room chats or instructional chats. That has been in place for years for colleges. It's easy for them to close a campus. We have 5-year-olds all the way up to 18-year-old students. So that said, we know our high school students and our middle school grades who are more progressive at certain schools, they're using Google Classroom already, and you can access that anywhere. The concern is who has access at home. And that's where our biggest concern is. Our younger grades, kindergarten through grade 5, we are assuming hard paper packets, mass copies, so that a student in 3rd grade would have a packet of work for 10 days of grade level activities of the standards, and that they would be able to take that home and do that work for 2 weeks. It would be hard copy. Those are parts of what we would be communicating of how would we get them to there, how could parents pick them up. The second bullet there is sanitation and disinfecting. What we have in place will take 4 to 5 days. Should a student or staff member be identified at a school site and we close the school site, it's a 4 to 5 day process that we would be implementing. That said, what happens with staff who aren't ill? Then we look at relocation or placement of staff so that they can continue to work. One of the things that public health has instituted as a guideline is whenever possible, people who are able to work from distant work, work from home, or work from other locations, to please do so. And that would be this case should we close the school. The last thing is that we will still provide breakfast and lunch to our students. What that looks like, we are still working with the city, because the city placed this on their website today, that we are working together so that people know exactly where they can pick up their meals. So it won't just be at our schools. The city would be helping us in other locations where families could pick up meals for that day. Those are the most important, immediate steps of action that we are ready for, should it come time to close the school. We want to be very cautious about closing a school, and that's why we're going to be following the public health guidelines accordingly. Is that enough for the worst case scenario?
Well, I'll provide this little bit of information as it keeps coming in, but during the closure, all athletic events and practices and games in Sac City will be canceled Monday, starting tomorrow night at midnight, and going through the closure on Wednesday.
There's the Metro League right there.
And that's, yeah, there's the Metro League.
Thank you.
So they're basically approaching everything as though it's a rain out for those particular sports.
Thank you. And thank you also for the words. This is so fluid. Literally, just when we have something written with factual information and guidance, because once we write something, we have multiple people look at it, multiple entities before we send it out. It's not like we're just typing something and then sending something out. We get the blessing in the eyes of multiple organizations before we send something out so that it's accurate and congruent with everybody else's. But it's things like that wasn't even in place at 5:30, starting our meeting. And that's how fast information is changing. So that's why I say to my staff, I had a staff letter go out this week. I have another one going out in the morning, to thank them for their kind understanding, because it is very fluid.
Yeah.
But they're living it right then and there on the ground. So we're trying as best as possible and as quickly as possible with what we have. So.
And I'd like to echo that for the public as well, is that, I know, and believe me, I understand how stressful this time is for everyone. And hopefully the public gives us the latitude and the understanding that, hey, that we're working in a very fluid situation, that not only is it changing from day to day, it's changing from hour to hour, literally changing from minute to minute. And understand that, we are trying to do what is absolutely best in the best interest of all of our kids. Because you have 4 board members here who have children that attend the schools in this, 5.
Grandma.
And grandma.
Yeah.
That have children in these schools. And so it's not like we're doing things haphazardly just to kind of give it. Well, we're doing what we believe is in the best interest, in the best way to serve all of our kids, because our kids are part of those. When we say that, our personal kids are all part of that. And I understand that sometimes it seems like the decisions aren't being made as fast as you may not like, or may not be made the way that you think that they should be made. But understand they're being made with the best interests of our students at heart. And so just as long as we all kind of can operate from that standpoint, and moving forward, I think it makes things a lot easier for all of us involved.
Very good.
So,
Thank you.
No, I second that in terms of just, again, I'm going to reiterate, I feel like it's a measured and thoughtful response. We have parents I've talked to who are the sky is falling parents, like, why are we doing this? So we actually all have talked to parents who are like, that think that we have the entire spectrum.
Yes.
And so I believe that the approach that we've taken is really measured and thoughtful, and with the guidance from the California Department of Public Health, Yolo County Department of Public Health, as well as CDE and others. So I appreciate the fact that we are facts-driven and that we are data-driven, and that also I want to reiterate what you said, Yorgos presented to the City Council, is that we have been prepared for any pandemic, because that's just part of our governance process.
Right.
If the measles were to have broken out, if anything would have broken out, that we had our protocols in place. So it wasn't too hard to come up with these specific measures and protocols. So I appreciate that we're not reactionary, that it's in our board policy and already to kind of deal with public health risks generally. So
Thank you for
I
that.
want to
Yes.
acknowledge that.
Thank you.
That it's not just this, it's that there are lots of different communicable diseases
Right.
that our children are at risk of, and that you all have actually had those protocols in place. And again, appreciate the data-driven decision-making and being strategic about it.
Great. Thank you.
And even though it may not seem like it, there is a plan in place. We're following that plan. And I think the best thing you can do is, once you have a plan in place, is to trust the plan, trust the process, and follow it to the best as best we possibly can, to make sure, instead of being reactionary into everything that changed. Because if we did that, we would never get anything. Yeah, we'd be up.
It would
We'd
be a
make
lot of
snap decisions.
confusion.
Right.
A lot of confusion
Lot of
is what would
confusion.
happen.
Yeah, a lot of miscommunications. And I do really appreciate the work that you guys have done in the last 4 or 5 days in terms of getting that information out as best you possibly can in as many avenues as possible, to try and keep the community informed as far as what's going on in our district. And also at the same time trying to put out as many of the unusual and unwarranted letters and fake information that people are putting out on behalf of themselves and things like that. So, Vice President Zadi. Okay. And with that, we have a couple of public comments. David Weller.
Good evening, and actually you hit on most of my concerns. So that had to do with the cafeteria issue as far as kids sitting and where do they sit. The fact that we did bring up as far as Placer County did have 6, I'm assuming those kids probably sat in the cafeteria. So again, I'm kind of curious as far as how that's going to work with maximal seating with trying to accommodate the 6 feet in between. Excuse me. Would like to discuss as far as that the chain of information and coming out, it's not always going out as far as internet and emails. I've been called by a lot of parents saying, did you get this? I didn't understand this. So maybe some tweaking on that. I like the idea of the principals doing the announcements for the phone calls. I think that would definitely help. The last thing is that I do know that as far as dealing with the hand washing and the soap for 3 minutes, but I've got a daughter who says that they're running out of soap in the
20
bathroom.
seconds. 20 seconds.
20 seconds.
ABCs, 2 times.
Yeah, well, there's no ABC if you don't have soap to put on it. That's the issue. So they've been running out of the bathrooms. So just the water isn't enough, just the friction, you do need the soap. So if we can just make sure there's more soap checks, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Nakiba Gregory.
I've received a couple of texts. One is, I don't feel safe. I don't feel like it's being taken seriously. I have an older mom at home, and I'm worried about bringing the corona home. I'm also a person with pre-existing conditions. Another one was, I have been concerned that there has been no recommendations or directives that have made for our older teachers or the immune compromised. It seems unfair to ask them to continue on business as usual. And another about PE equipment. That PE equipment, how is that going to be dealt with? And with that, art equipment. You know, I have over 700 students that go through my room each week. And as of yet, I have not had my tables cleaned. Thank you.
Thank you. London Weller.
No, Dad, I got this.
So from my understanding, Sly Park is canceled. And I was wondering if there will be any makeups for that, or if we can do it over summer, or if possibly if we can do it in 7th grade, because it is a once in a lifetime chance that we can do it as a whole group for the 6th grade. And people are spending tons of money already trying to get the stuff to go to Sly Park. And then, will the running for Rut Race be canceled?
Would you like to?
Respond to both.
Are there any more comments? I'm writing
No.
down the things, okay.
No more. That's
Okay,
it.
so I'll do my best if I can answer some of this.
Sure.
So in terms of pre-existing conditions, we have policy in our teacher contracts and our CSEA contracts that talk about how employees can get assistance and support, and they need to see the Human Resources Department. We are not business as usual. I have not done one thing this week except work on the coronavirus information and be on mandated phone calls since Saturday when Elk Grove announced their closure. I've not done one thing except this or gone home at a reasonable time or even seen my family. We are not business as usual. Our practices are different. We have dropped everything to address the concerns of this and the mass amount of effort and the hands that it takes to get things to the school sites. And so we are not business as usual, but in terms of, I don't want to say older teachers, I fall under this category of not a pre-existing condition, but of, the public health talks about 60 or older, not to be, the one thing they talk about is to not attend mass gatherings, which is why they talked a lot about the religious organizations such as church congregations that they have a lot of senior citizens. The city has canceled all senior citizen activities because they are a gathering together of the one population of at risk. So if any employee of the district feels concerned, they really do need to see the Human Resources Department or their administrator, because we have support or assistance or options that they can think about.
So just for clarity, I'm hearing you loud and clear that they have permission to actually request if they are concerned about their
Any
health risk.
concerns,
I
they
just wanna be
really
very, very
need to
clear
be.
about that.
Yeah, they need to be expressed, and they need to be expressed by the people that have the concerns, because otherwise we're not able to
It's
help.
a HIPAA issue.
Yes, it's a HIPAA issue. Absolutely, thank you.
So-
It is absolutely, and which is why I'm saying human resources, while Norma is smiling at me, because those are HIPAA privacy rights.
Right. So I just want to be clear that we don't know, and so
Yes.
I just want to be abundantly clear that those who have that concern, and due to HIPAA, we don't know. but
Yes.
Feel free and have permission to request.
Yes, thank you. We will follow up on all of the things. Every time we have a board meeting, we do follow up with staff in charge of those areas. So we definitely will do that as I've written them down. I want to thank our young student who made the comment. Sly Park is probably the most heartbreaking of every activity that we have had to call, because Stonegate Schools was scheduled for March 30th. We are negotiating with Sly Park right now. And, we are negotiating very heavily that, one, they need to be flexible and reschedule it during the school year if at all possible, like at the end of May or at the end of the school year in June, and extend out. Give their people time off now while school districts are closing, or schools, they're not allowing students to go on field trips and overnight trips like that. Let your staff go, not work now, but maybe work later in June. Or we will be assured that our students who don't get to go this year get to go next year, and that we double the amount at Stonegate School. Now, we also know that Bridgeway is scheduled to go in May, but we're kind of pausing because that's in the middle of May, and we're going to see how that goes in terms of where we are in the spread of the infection. So that's where we are with those, and we will follow up with any statements about follow-through and things like that. Absolutely.
Vice President Zadi.
I just want to say a quick thank you to you and the cabinet for all their hard work. I understand that you've been incredibly busy on this, and I do appreciate you taking time out to meet with me today out of your umpteen million phone calls that you've had to be on and meet with staff. So just know that you are appreciated, especially Yorgos. The communications that you send out are phenomenal. They're very informative. I've been reposting as much as I can, as well as the other board members here. So I just want to say that I think you guys are doing an outstanding job given the extremely hectic circumstances that you're being put under. And this is a fire, and you're being tested, and I really do appreciate the work you've done.
Thank you for the kind comments from the board. I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to the staff, because people like Terry Souza, our director of MOT, has had to really be very direct and change routes, change things to address this. All of our cabinet level especially, and Yorgos, of course, he's the one that's been working 24/7, because he's in constant communication with so many networks of make sure this is being communicated, or other things are being communicated but don't actually aren't congruent with our county guidelines or Washington Unified's guidelines. So there's a lot of filtering through that too. So thank you.
Trustee Wong.
Just one last kind of a note. I know that there was an executive order signed today regarding the Brown Act. So maybe can we let folks know just in terms of governance of what those changes in practice may be for us, given
Yes, so I didn't I had it actually on my phone. It is Executive Order N-25-20. When the governor signed a state of emergency for California, it was so that California would be able to receive federal aid and federal support. That was the primary purpose of that. In that, he has also declared a waiver of governing boards, the waiver of Brown Act implications and procedures in regards to meeting. And because he understands that the things are changing so quickly, we've said that so often tonight, that governing boards are needing to actually talk together to ensure everybody's on the same page in determining direction and actions on behalf of the communities. So let's say if we get to the worst case scenario, we will have to call an emergency meeting because I will not be making that decision alone. We all will be making that together as a community under the guise of public health, under the guise of our County Office of Education as well. So what the governor has allowed is waiving of the posting of the agendas for 72 hours as required for regular meetings, 24 hours for special meetings. Emergency meetings, the requirement is 1 hour. There are times in that particular language, not in the governor's language, but in government code, where if there is a dire emergency, you can call the meeting officially and post it as you walk into the meeting, and it could be an official posting in a dire emergency. Those are all found in government code, that particular government code 54956.5A1.
I was specifically talking about phone conferencing.
Yeah, so phone conferencing would...
Teleconferences.
Yes,
With the board.
teleconferencing and versus being in person. You can always, actually, that's always been in place so long as you post it on the agenda. In an emergency meeting, you can have I've had an emergency meeting in a parking lot in other districts where we congregated in the parking lot because all of my trustees worked full-time into the city. And so they met, made a decision, took action, and boom, they had to leave. And so teleconferencing, phone conferencing as emergencies, absolutely, you don't have to be present physically.
Continue.
Can I clarify too, though, because in the past, say if you're home after I had a surgery and if I wanted to post that agenda, it would be posted to the public to come to my home. And so
That's very clear.
the change in the Brown Act, I think what's really important to us is that if that is changed and let's say we are home for some reason.
Or
that-
on work travel.
Or on work travel, that right now you don't need to open that to the public to come to be at that place as long as there is a place for them to be.
Correct.
I think that's
That's exactly
important.
right.
Correct. So that would be like the district office or something like that.
Right.
Mhm.
So that was my clarification.
Oh, sorry.
No, that was, thank you for noting that
Sorry.
everything else is waived, but that in emergency situations, because
Right.
a lot of us do travel for work and
Right.
family and other things, that for our homes, that a teleconference would be sufficient to meet the
Right.
needs of the governing body.
Yes.
And so calling from the district office, you calling from the district office and having the public access that is
Yes.
sufficient.
Yes, absolutely. You're all very busy people. But I appreciate, and I want to, in closing, thank you very much for all your leadership, all your guidance, all your efforts towards Washington Unified School District and myself as your superintendent. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. N1, update on supplemental curriculum and technology. Where is it?
Thank you, board members. Thank you, Cabinet. I was initially the first informational item, so I brought some speakers tonight, so they're getting a little restless here. But we understand how important that item was. So I do have some slides up there that hopefully I can, it just takes a second. But tonight we're going to talk about some of our supplemental curriculum. So these are oftentimes programs that we use to support the regular classroom core learning that goes on in there based on various student needs. So we just want to give you an update of some of that. And, you know, as with all programs, you look at them and you try to measure how well they're doing in the classroom. So that's the most important thing. How do they translate to success for our students in the classroom as a supplemental material? And a big part of that, obviously, is the input we get from teachers and just what we observe from talking with teachers. In addition to that, we look at the different assessments that students do, and we try to see, is there a result that is different? Has this made an impact in some way, a positive impact, an improvement, growth? That's what we're looking for, and we try our best to measure that. And of course, there's different assessments. We have our regular pre and post assessments that we've been using, but we also have some statewide assessments as well as the LPAC and CASP. Tonight, I'm going to talk to you about 6 programs. All of them could be very lengthy and actually be a presentation by themselves. So bear with me. You are getting a little bit of a Reader's Digest version to be perfectly transparent. But we have 6 programs. They are all relatively new within our district. I believe there's not one there that, except for one, that has been used for more than 3 years or been, you know, at least exposed to in our district for 3 years. So we're going to talk about a little bit about guided reading, FEV tutoring, Fuel Education, Edgenuity, Alexia, and Sonde systems. So these are district-wide supplemental programs, so these are things that the district supports. There are also various site-based supplemental programs that are usually done through the site-based funds, and those aren't something we're going to talk about tonight. The first one we're going to talk about is guided reading. This is probably the first year that it's at use at all our schools. This is used primarily for our primary grade students, and it works with helping students process text. One of the key ingredients of this is that it's really based on scaffolded success and the use of leveled reading books. And so you think of some of the work by Vygotsky of zone-proximal development, where you're looking, every kid develops a little bit different. It's not one size fits all. Every student is going to read at a little bit of a different level, and they will grow at different levels. So it's all about those different levels and supporting that in the classroom. I did bring with me a best practitioner so that she could give you a little bit better idea of how it works in the classroom. You may know her already. So I have Deanna Wasserman. She is the instructional coach at Southport Elementary School. So I brought her up here just to tell you a little bit about how it works technically.
Hello. Hello. Did you put those other 2 slides? Oh, great. So guided reading, I am a big fan, as you've probably heard me up here before, partly because it meets each student's needs. Yes, whole group teaching is an important part of a classroom. We all know that. But not all of our students develop at the same rate. And being able to provide them with the opportunities to read at their level, to give them the strategies, is, to me, just a gold mine. So this is for you to look at later. But there's just some information about what it looks like on the teacher's end, before, during, and after reading. Notice there's a lot of discussion. It adds in writing, conversation. It looks at the decoding piece and also the comprehension piece. And then also for students, what it looks like for them before, during, and after reading. So we have a lot of teachers who've gone through training. It's not a curriculum, it's a set of strategies. And so by teaching these teachers the strategies, you can use it with any curriculum. Level books are, of course, of importance, but once you have those strategies, you find you start using them all the time with your students. And so I think as far as dollars, it's a good bang for our buck. If we can teach teachers how to better meet the needs of students and differentiate, then it translates to all of our classrooms across the board. So I think that's, do you have any other questions?
Vice President Posada.
Yeah, I do have a question, actually. So if, say, a first grader is reading at 100 words, and they should be at 150 words. And the teacher says, I don't have enough time to assist with all these other kids needing my help. They're stretched thin. And we no longer have, at some of our schools, the ability to have reading intervention specialists. How does guided reading help them?
So I came from a district that had absolutely no intervention specialists. I didn't even know what an intervention specialist was till I moved to this district. And yet we all provided all of our needs for our students, and this was the way we did it. Because it allows you to have small group instruction. The other students are doing meaningful work, so everybody's doing meaningful work, and then you're allowed to have that time with a small group and meet the group's needs. For our students who are ahead of grade level, you're able to give them information and provide their needs at their level, and for our students who are struggling. So I think, to be honest, this is the way to do it. And so as far as 100 words per minute versus 150, there is the whole fluency thing. It's more about the comprehension and reading for meaning. So that's part of all that too. But.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. But the teacher is recommending that they need an intervention specialist. And that's because they don't have the capacity to go above and beyond what guided reading is providing them. So it's what I'm hearing is that it's not working for a couple of students. So if that's the case, how do we provide these services to make sure we get our kids the help they need?
I'd have to look individually at that teacher and probably ask them some questions directly. We are starting this implementation. There are some places where the implementation is stronger than other places. And so for me, one of the things to look at is making sure that everybody is trained properly and that they really understand the program. We have been training teachers, but I would have to kind of look at that individually to talk to that teacher a little bit more directly to find out exactly what the issue was with that student. Part of it is also a change in philosophy. So I've heard oftentimes when it's talked about guided reading that sometimes it's not just about being another curriculum, but sometimes it's also a mindset. There are other initiatives that I can point to over time that we have tried that certain teachers have had difficulty implementing. And so I think it's a lot of it can be training and also a mindset issue. I was at one training just recently, and I had two teachers next to me. They were primary grade teachers. We weren't looking at guided reading, but we were watching another teacher expose us to something regarding technology. As they were watching that teacher, and these are both veteran teachers, very well-respected teachers in our district, they were watching this one teacher implement something. One teacher says, "Oh my gosh, that is the greatest thing I could ever think of." The next teacher next to her said, "Oh my gosh, that's going to make me work so much harder." So, two different answers from two people standing right next to each other. So sometimes, I'd have to really look individually at each one of those people, what was going on. So it's hard to answer that question without really kind of getting some insights. But I can tell you part of this process, and I will elaborate a little bit about next steps, is also gathering info to find out where those gaps are. That's a big part of this as well. Yeah.
I just had two questions. On the FEV tutoring, how many students are in that?
Let me get there. I haven't got there yet.
It seems to be a theme tonight. Well, let's wait until that last slide.
It's not even going to be the last slide. I promise.
Let you go.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
This was just guided reading.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Since we had her up here.
Yeah.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All
right. Trustee Kirby Gonzalez.
Okay, this could be now or later, but because I know you're going through all the systems, and my question would be specifically on guided reading with the costs. I know there's the materials and books, and I've seen it in action, and I'm supportive of all that's happening with it. My question is from a budget standpoint, what is the ongoing cost versus what is the one-time cost? Or do we have an idea of that? Because it is so much larger than the others, and some of these are ongoing computer-based programs.
I think our biggest, I haven't really been able to look at that from a multi-year projection. What I can tell you is probably our biggest cost going forward into next year will be training. That'll probably be our biggest cost going into next year. So, but as far as materials, we'd have to take some inventory. I'd have to get some input and look at that before we.
Think that we are going to be in a place soon, if not now, where maybe our instructional coaches would be able to lead that training?
You read my mind. Yes, you did. So that's actually exactly where we're thinking about going. So yes, you've unlocked my mystery, Sarah. So
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Stan, I do have a question on this one. So what grades is the guided?
Primary. This is for primary. Mm-hmm. Okay, FEV tutoring. All right, we're there.
There you go.
So this is a brand new program. When I mean by brand new, we've only been using it for about 3 months. So this is a very new program to our district. We don't use it at all schools, but one of the interesting things about this program is it's a tutor, but the kids are not alone in that virtual world. On the other end of the system is an actual teacher who actually interacts with the student in this process. They're not verbally interacting with them; it's through chat online, and through the images that they project through the system. And this is open 24/7 for students. We have really been. Honestly, I hate to use the word pilot. I think we're trying it out in different levels to see if it has an impact. It's primarily used for intervention students, grades 6 through 12, but basically for students that need intervention. And this year solely we're using it for kids who need intervention in mathematics for this year. We've been using it, I think, in different ways. And one way we're using it is after-school intervention. At Elkhorn, they use this as an after-school intervention with their students. One of the teachers at Elkhorn is also using it as a tool for differentiation. So they're doing their regular instruction, and then they've brought this in as a model to work with certain students who might be having some difficulties, because it is open 24/7. And another way we're using it at River City High School is working with students with disabilities and helping catch them up to be grade level. And in one exceptional, and we're using it at Riverbank. They just started not too long ago. But we're also using it, one exception, with an EL learner who is not doing this in the school, but they're just using it at home with their parents. So it was a very special circumstance. So we're trying that out. That student, by chance, has actually logged in the most minutes of any other student in the district. So they are getting good use. Again, any online tool, motivation is very important. Having the right circumstances. If you're not in an environment where the teacher is directly there supervising you, those can be issues. This happens to be a very motivated student from a very motivated family, and we're making some progress there. Right now, I can tell you that there's different results at different schools. I couldn't tell you that it's universally working at every one of those situations. There's still some work to be done. I also brought another best practitioner for us. I have Mrs. Holly Buckley. She is a teacher. She is the department chair at River City High School, working with students with disabilities. So I brought her up here to tell you a little bit about it. You're welcome.
Good evening, Board President and Superintendent Luna. I'm Holly Buckley. I work as an education specialist at River City High School. I've been involved in implementing the pilot program of FEV tutoring at River City. So far this year, we've had about 45 students enrolled, and we have over 200 hours of logged time. We targeted the students that we felt had the greatest need and needed the most support in their Math 1, and then we expanded it a little bit into Math 2 and business math and personal finance. The way we worked with FEV was we shared the students' curriculum and their tests and their homework that they were getting from their math department. So it was a combined effort with the math department and the special education department. And FEV is currently working with the students on their homework skills and on the practice tests so that they're better prepared going into the tests. We also have one student who failed his Math 1 test, but his Math 1 class, but was finishing the requirements to finish the class through FEV, and the teacher was doing a grade change upon completion through FEV. So that was a really good use of FEV because the student did not have to go through the Edgenuity or the credit recovery that we have poor success rates with times with our students. So I think that we are enjoying having the program. Thank you very much.
So how many students I'm sorry. Go ahead. So how many students are utilizing this program?
At this point, we have 93 students across the district that are using this program. Do you have a?
Oh, no. I actually had the privilege of actually walking through a demo of this in another life, another job. And so really excited that this is here because I think it meets the needs of the students. And I know it's only 3 months, so I am not sure if you'll see results that quickly. What I appreciated about this, and tell me if I'm wrong, is that it's actually for our multilingual students, you can actually translate within that same environment.
Yes, so that was one of the special circumstances with the student that we're allowing this to be used at home with, is because of language issue.
Right.
And so that's true.
Because most of our tutoring now is English-based, right?
Yes.
So but for a lot of our English language learners in multiple different languages, the opportunity to, and again, if we could actually perhaps see even just the brief demo of it, it's actually fairly impressive.
So I can work to arrange that.
Yeah.
And thank you for pointing that out because that is a very significant part of their program. Okay. I'm going to talk about another browser-based curriculum, Fuel Education. This has been actually within our district for many years. This used to be called Eventa Learning at another time. It was originally brought to YOLO. YOLO High School was the first place to use this, and they've been using that for many years with credit recovery. And we use it still with credit recovery, but we also do some alternative scheduling with it. There are certain students within the high school master schedule that can't fit certain things into their schedule for different reasons. And we have worked with them taking courses online through this, and we have set up a structure for them to do that. We've also worked with it try to work it into certain classrooms as a blended program. In other words, kind of going hand in hand with what the teacher is doing. So we've been working with that as well. It is only used right now with grades 9 through adult. And I say adult because if you look, one of the places this is being used is actually adult education. In fact, our adult education program is the main user of this program. Even though we do use it at River City High School, it's used at West Sac Middle College High School. It's also used still at YOLO High School. River City is actually the lowest user of this program. Those other 3 programs actually use it more than they do. And you can see, you could take multiple things, so you don't have to just settle for one course. A lot of our adult ed students, they may be taking multiple courses this way. So we had about 274 users. I believe this is this year's data so far that have completed 833 courses between all 4 of those schools. And right now, this is a 3-year license. So this is actually going to run out, and we are evaluating this program very hard right now because the license is about to run out. And that's why I'm switching to the next slide very quickly, because this is another program that is very similar. We are using this, but we're using it less. This is mostly used at River City High School with our independent study program there. But it does many of the same things: credit recovery, alternative schedule, blended learning. It can do the same types of things. So far this year, we've had 206 users complete 233 courses. We are also preparing to test this with 6 middle grades students right now. So we're trying to get a little bit of that going. What we're hoping to do is find out if this can help with some of the electives that our middle graders could have access to that they currently don't, such as foreign language. And things like that. My experience, to be quite transparent with you, is these programs are great, but you have to be very motivated to take an online course. For example, just because you're taking it online, no one should think that's easier. In fact, it's probably harder. And we've had more students the students that have been most successful seem to be 11th and 12th graders. We have tried this with our younger grades. Didn't do so well with 9th graders, to the point where wherever in the future, we've always just had, we had to make very sure before we put a 9th grader on one of these programs, we had to be very careful, where at first we just put them in there and we learned kind of the hard ways that, hey, these guys are not, this is going to take a little bit extra to get through here. So we've had to kind of adapt a little bit with these programs. They're not always easy. High literacy level, you have to be motivated. I think that's the main thing. So it's interesting because up there it has a certain amount of users and courses that have been completed. The truth is, where as you get into spring, particularly with high school students, you get some kids that are procrastinated for a little bit of time, and they start running out of time, and suddenly the numbers of people completing these courses go way up. We probably complete more in those 3 months, the rest of the 3 months of the year, than we will the entire year put together. So this is a program that our teachers at River City seem to value more. I guess they seem to think the interface is friendlier and better to use, and so we're in the process of evaluating that. So I wanted to bring it to your attention.
Stan?
Yes.
Can I ask a question about the cost here? It says $25,000 based on the yearly cost of licenses. How many licenses do we utilize?
I think in this case it was a building license. So it was like unlimited amount of licenses per building. And what I mean by building, like at a school site.
So if you have, say, 10 buildings at a school site, then you get...
Let me clarify buildings. I mean buildings being a school site.
So facility.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
per
yes,
facility.
yeah. Mhm.
So if you use it at, say, 3 sites, then that's $75,000.
And then, you know, as we look at this for next year, we're going to have to kind of look at the pricing, right? Some of our facilities are not equal in terms of what kind of usage they're going to get out of this program, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our K-8 obviously is not going to have as high use as this, so we have to. That's stuff we would have to work through with Edgenuity.
So then I was going to go down to the breakdown of the cost per user.
Mhm.
Like if we had it broken down, say there's 206 users district-wide at a cost of $75,000, right?
This one's about 25.
Well, this was per site, you said, 25,000 per site.
Right.
If there's
right.
3 sites being utilized.
Okay, I understand, yeah.
You get what I'm saying? So if that were the case, then there was 206 users divided by 75.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it. And I think as we get down the road, we haven't made our choice of which one we'd like to maybe stick with in the long run yet. But when we do, I think that you're kind of giving us some good advice on how to like break it down a little bit in terms of cost. Ultimately, what we want though is a program that's going to work really well with our kids.
Right.
That's ultimately what we're going to do. But I think, yeah, we are going to have to look at that cost breakdown of what we can get out of it per user. And like I said, we are trying this. We are currently trying this a little bit with our 6th through 8th grade, and we'll see how that goes. These classes are designed for middle school kids, so they're not high school classes. I want to be very clear about that. So you know, if you look at their advertisements, they say K through 12, but my experience with them has just been 9 through 12, and so we'll have to. Before we make a full-out investment on adding buildings to that cost, we really want to see if it's going to do what we want it to do. That's kind of what we're trying to evaluate. Okay. Next program is Alexia. Now this is probably the most widely used of the programs that we're sharing with you tonight. My information is that we have roughly 3,000 student users of this program. This is grades K through 5. There is a 6-8 component, but I think that's not nearly used as much as the K-5 component. And this is also a reading program, but this is also a technology-based program, so you do need hardware to access this program. Kids can sign in. They can also sign in at home and do things from there as well as just signing in during school. And so it can be used at home and in the classroom. We're currently on a 3-year license that doesn't expire till the end of next year, so we still have this for another year right now. And I have brought up a best practitioner who's been waiting very patiently, Judy Marino.
Hi, y'all. My name is Judy Moreno, and I am the instructional coach over at Riverbank. I've been using Lexia now. Mike Woodcock was still here when I started using Lexia because he said, try this out. And it's a web-based program. And I'm going to return back to your original guided reading question that you had for Deanna Wasserman. So the way Lexia works, and I'll circle back to that, is let's pretend I'm a second grade teacher. You've got your second grade classroom. You set your students down with their devices. They take an assessment test for Lexia that will rank them by level. And then a teacher gets a printout. The feedback is immediate. Teacher gets a printout, okay, this is where my students are. Let's say Jack is at level 4, so I would give him a paper skill builder level 3. So these are skills he's already mastered, but he still needs to work on. So the way that it would work with a teacher who's time strapped but still wants to engage in intervention in her classroom is say, you 6 are coming back with me for guided reading, you 12 are on the Lexia program, you other 12 are doing your skill builders. When your group gets up to move, you quickly walk around, you switch the groups around, but you can look over a child's shoulder and see while they're on the program if they're struggling. The apple in the corner will turn red. If it's been multiple attempts and they failed, the apple will turn green. If they're in the middle of being instructed, you get immediate feedback every single day on where your kids are going. The program only allows for about 20 minutes screen time, so no one should be parking their kids on the program for 60 minutes. You can access it from home. Trying to think what else. Lexia itself has been a great company. There was a while when I was calling them every day, and they just knew me by name and said, what can we do for you, Judy, in West Sacramento and the East Coast? We're in New York. So it's a great program when it is used correctly. And when there's constant update and feedback with the students. So when I ran it, all my kids had a folder. They had skill builders in one pocket, guided reading stuff in another pocket, and I would just collect 6 folders a day and just give immediate feedback the next day. You're on point, you're falling behind. Oh, Lexia told me, you've been stuck here for a while. I've got a lesson, I'm gonna pull you back. 4 of you are struggling in the same spot. It's time for a lesson. So there's lots of opportunity for you to address any holes in your classroom. Questions?
It's funny because I hadn't heard of Alexia until my daughters started it this year. And I'll be honest with you, at first I was kind of taken aback by it because, I mean, my kids had been reading since kindergarten. And when I say reading, I mean like reading to the point where like my wife and I would have to, my wife would have to go into their room at night and tell them to turn the lights off because they were staying up till 10 o'clock at night reading. But then when they first got their first Lexia, to me, it didn't seem like it kind of jived with where their reading levels were. And so it kind of threw us off. It kind of threw us off a little bit. And so just to be able to kind of see that the progress that they've made throughout the course of the school year has been an interesting experience.
Interesting how? Say more about that, Preston.
Interesting. Interesting in that because you see them now, because when the Lexia that they were originally placed at was I mean, I'm a proud dad, you know. It was a little bit lower than what I would have thought that they should have been for the amount of reading that they've done. But the thing about it was that I guess there's some sort of a point system that's involved with Lexia, or maybe that's something that their teacher does or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, it motivated one of my kids to try and break her record, the class record that her teacher had, and because she had never had a student that had gotten so many points last year. And some kid got 800, and my daughter, that was her goal, was to beat that score. And yeah, and she beat it like a month and a half ago. So,
oh, that's great.
You know, so
yeah.
So that was like I said, it was just been an interesting experience watching the kids kind of progress through the Alexia program as the years gone on. And I think what it's done is kind of given them a little bit more confidence and being able to take on more challenging material than maybe what they probably would have otherwise.
Yeah.
So
the beauty of the program too is if a child is at level 13 and they're just kind of phoning it in, you can say, you're on 15, and you can kind of manually move them. You're not at the mercy of the program. You can actually get in and move them around. So that's nice too. So there have been children that are listening to music and trying to do the program at the same time. And we can say, all right, you're playing, like we're gonna move you up. So it's been neat to just kind of be able to nudge where you can nudge instead of waiting at the mercy of a program to move them along.
or kids that just take the assessments to try and move up and then
So a lot of students suddenly over the weekend will pass 3 levels, and that's happened. And so when they come back, we just pay attention to that, and then I give them the 3 skill builders for the foundation below and pull out random pages and just say, let me see what you got on paper. So it's just different ways to use the program.
Yeah.
So, and this is the first time I heard that you could use it at home.
Yes.
So this is,
Really?
yeah, shocking.
Where have you been?
Yeah.
I'm under a rock, apparently. So,
Both of them have.
you know, in terms of home utilization,
Yes.
do we help administer this, or do the kids already know how to?
They should know how to log in and go for it. The basics that I tell a parent is watch for the color of the apple in the left-hand corner. And there's a line that travels across the bottom of the screen. And you want to make sure that your child at home gets all the way across, because if you stop midway when they log back in, they have to go all the way back to the beginning, which is super frustrating for them. And we didn't even know that, I think, the first year. We were like, I don't know why it restarts you. You must have done something wrong. But so those are the 2 things just to pay attention to for home administration, I would say.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we were actually having a conversation out here. We realized that maybe not all our students are having access. So just kind of wondering, which is totally fine. Well, my daughters love Alexia, and they like the gamification of learning, and they love reading too. So proud mama. One had a perfect score on, not that scores are every perfect score on her ELA, but let's put that aside.
Yeah.
And also, actually, work with Deanna too. So proud mama, proud Southport mama. So is that like, how does a student get chosen to access Alexia, or like, is it a teacher-driven thing? Is it
So if you're working in a classroom where you don't have one-to-one devices, that's where the rotation piece is extremely beneficial.
Gotcha.
Only have 10 computers, we're going to make these rotations work, so that at least students are getting on every other day if they can't access it every day.
Only 3,000 students, so yeah. Go ahead, ask.
Our question being, and I know your children are fabulous, if it's 3,000, are you saying that that's all of our students that have access to it?
That's all that may have been logged in.
Okay.
So they may have access. Again, it goes back to some of the things that were mentioned. You heard Judy kind of mentioned if used as it should be. And so one of the things that in evaluating, as preparing for tonight's meeting, I had a meeting with actual Alexia. And one of the things I found out was that the last time they had actually been to our district to train was 2017. So to remind the board, in 2017, your director of curriculum and instruction and every principal at every school site wasn't in their position at that point. So that's, so I think there's some uniformity that probably has to be introduced. I do know that Southport, I think of the schools that I saw, had the highest usage. And so, I'm just kind of getting into this a little bit, but as we look at going forward toward next year, a big part of our inventory is, well, what are the training needs? What are the training needs? Because there's probably new teachers that have also come into in that time since 2017. Not sure if everybody's been onboarded onto the program. I'm sure most of them have. 3,000 users still is pretty significant, and that would be the majority of our K-5 students. However, there could be gaps too, so we're going to have to evaluate that so that we make sure that we have a good implementation.
But here's a critical question. Did they say, but Judy from West Sac is there, so we trust that we didn't need to be there since 2017.
The training actually was offered this year. It was like flown out, like, do you want this? And enough teachers at our site said no thank you.
Gotcha.
So I remember it being, I'm sorry, I'm looking at Annie, but I remember it being offered this year, and our teachers were like, we got it.
So we'll have to, but like I said, we'll have to look at that because it's been a while since some people have added, and not every principal might be familiar with the program either.
Yeah, exactly. I think especially when you have such a high turnover, or not high turnover, but when there's been such a huge amount of turnover, particularly in administrators, I think it's probably very important to have something like this on a retraining schedule.
Yes.
Not only for teachers, because we forget things, and also for administrators to kind of bring them up to speed as well. One question I did have that I noticed something that is not on here, Prodigy.
Oh, yeah.
How does this
Math,
compare
Prodigy.
with, is Prodigy math?
Prodigy is math.
Okay. Well, that's why I'm not related to reading. Okay. Yeah. I was wondering, because that was for a different reason, because I remember when we were in South Carolina for Christmas, and my daughters were with their cousins who live in Colorado, and they were all doing, oh, you guys do Prodigy too. And so that was,
So there's a lot less usage in Prodigy than there is in this program. It's also logged on differently. And so for me to actually monitor it is it's going to take a little bit more digging. So I'm going to have to dig a little bit deeper into that one.
okay. So then back up that other question. So do we have a retraining schedule in place for for these programs, or?
We're preparing one.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Judy. Okay. So we also have Sunday Systems, and this is an intervention-based program based on Orton Gillingham approach, and it's used specifically with our students identified with a learning disability, most specifically dyslexia. And it's done in small groups, and our RSP teachers were trained last school year, and they've been implementing it this year. I have from Riverbank School also, I have Cynthia Friedenberg, and she, our director of special ed just raves about what she sees her doing with Sunday. So I brought her up here a little bit to give you a little bit of detail.
Stan didn't tell me I had to talk, so that's okay. I just thought I was here to support. But from what I'm hearing, I guess there were some questions about how is growth kind of monitored and everything like that in the program, because I know I came probably a couple months ago now, and I talked about Sunday to you guys. So as far as growth goes in the program, there's a placement test at the very beginning, and it places them in a series of lessons. And then within that series of lessons, every 3 lessons, there is a mastery check. The big thing about Sunday is that you don't move forward unless your kids are meeting that mastery check. So if they're missing concepts, you go back and you reteach those lessons until they've mastered them. Within those, usually it's segmented by 1 through 9 or 1 through 10, and then it's kind of where you start in the program. There's also pre and post tests that you can give throughout it as well to see if they've kind of mastered all of that and they're ready to move up to the next section. I've seen a lot of progress with it, and I've also just started my second 6-week unit of after-school intervention with general ed students as well, which is going pretty well as long as they show up. It's harder to get them to come after school. But I'm seeing a lot of growth with my students in my class, and we do it every day. I do teach in an SDC class, so my students tend to be a little bit lower academically, but I'm seeing a lot of growth in their reading progress. The program works on their phonics skills, it works on spelling, and a little bit of vocabulary, because we'll talk about the words that they don't understand in the program. It doesn't typically work on comprehension. I use Lexia and Power Up for instead. So.
You mind? Yeah. Yeah, I know this is the program used most closely for those with dyslexia. This is near and dear to me. So, is there anything in this program that helps identify students with dyslexia? Because that is, I think, one of the hardest parts about getting kids into the program is identification.
There's some. It's not a full, just a diagnostic assessment. It's kind of once you've already been diagnosed with dyslexia or they kind of suspect it, you can go into the program. It's not necessarily a diagnosis tool itself.
Oh, okay. So how do we identify then? I guess that's kind of where I'm driving the conversation towards, away from this particular for a moment, because this is the tool we're using to help train and teach those that do have dyslexia. How are we ensuring that we're getting the most amount of kids into that program that need it?
So I know the way that, almost every kid in my class does it. I know for the resource teachers at my site, they pull those who have had either their triennial testings or at annual testings. They've kind of either suspected, or at a triennial when they've done the full battery of tests, they've kind of identified this is where we think they're struggling with dyslexia. And they pull those students specifically to work with them.
So if a student is struggling, then a teacher may say, hey, we want you to go through a battery of tests here to try and identify.
Yeah, and that's if they're in special education. So right now the program is...
I'm saying if they're not. Because, like I said, I was diagnosed in college. And so that's kind of where I made it... I was able to, slip through the cracks all the way until college before someone said, hey, you've got a problem. And And so I'm just trying to make sure that we're getting the most help to the kids that need it. And I'm focusing really on dyslexia because it's something that can be masked so easily.
So we have, basically you're probably familiar with the SST process, and usually it starts in the classroom where a teacher may, or a parent may notice certain things happening with that student. When they're reading and when they're performing in class.
Yeah.
And typically what will happen from there is they may refer them to like an SST meeting, and the team may meet and come up with a conclusion to add further tests to them, And so it's a process, and it's a step-by-step process that we basically have in our district for not just dyslexia, but any students that have any sort of could be other disabilities as well. But when they identify something that maybe is prohibiting some student from learning at their best, they'll kind of go into these protocols. Now, as far as, numbers of how accurate everything is, it all is a process. Like I said, I think you're basically wanting to know, are we able to catch everybody? And I don't think I can,
Well,
I don't know.
Maybe not capture everybody, but maximize as many as we possibly can. I mean, I'm hoping that we have the ability to at least identify as many of those, and if we're doing the proper things to see, hey, this looks like a problem.
So I think it's a good thing for me to look at and kind of analyze, and I can get some information for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions on Sunday? I need to thank all these nice ladies for coming up here, because I did tell them 6 o'clock. So when we moved the agenda, it kind of threw things for a loop, but we know how important that was.
We appreciate you all.
My IOU became more expensive
But now you know
when
what
you
we're
guys
gonna do with
turned the agenda.
COVID-19.
Yeah, right,
He owes you lunch.
Maybe more. All right. So we're doing some, just to kind of talk a little bit about 2021. So a big part of those first two bullets, guided reading and Alexia, I think a big part is to evaluate the training that's gone on and how, on where those gaps are. And like you said, President Jackson, to look at probably putting in a good training cycle for those teachers and staff for next year. So that's a big part of what we're going to be doing with those two programs. They will be with us next year. Guided reading has just gotten started. So we're going to, and there's things we've learned in the first couple of years. So we're going to want to make sure those best practices come to the forefront.
Question about that, though. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to me that, so guided reading's primarily used for grades 1 through 3, Alexia's grades for grades K through 8. What was the need? I mean, because I don't know, but what was the need, the thought process behind the need for bringing in something like guided reading? Was Alexia not adequate enough?
So quite frankly, I was not part of that thought process. But I have seen them both used simultaneously in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen it where, in terms of differentiation, you'll have one group working on Alexia, and then you'll have another group with their leveled readers books. So they're both tools.
Right.
And just like when a construction worker's got lots of different tools, they may do some similar things, but some of them are more precise for various areas.
Right.
And so looks like Superintendent Luna's up here, so I'm going to get out of the way.
So the inception of the concept of guided reading came from multiple years of preparing for it. So in 2015, when I first arrived, we had over 18 reading specialists, intervention specialists, EL specialists. And in looking through that first year of our instructional practices, what I learned is that we had so many pullouts of students out of their general classroom. What I found at one school, we had a student that was pulled out for half of his day out of his general education classroom for interventions, and at that time it was Read 180. And then we also had the other concern in Read 180 that we were supposed to have gotten rid of those back in 2012, 2013, when the state adopted the Common Core standards, and moving forward, they gave us permission for 2 years in 2010, 2012 and 13. They basically gave us permission to no standardized testing, no test scores counting, and do the transition into Common Core. Washington Unified was still using Read 180, which took students out of their general education classroom for core reading for 2 hours every single day. What we found in the data is that we had students in Read 180 for multiple years, meaning that if they were a 5th grader and they were in Read 180 for 3 years, when they went to River City High School in 9th grade English core, they weren't ready because they didn't have core language arts for many years. The other thing that we found in 2015 was the use of the, I took it out of my mind because it was the curriculum of the scripted curriculum. I don't even remember the name of it. Open Court, thank you for bringing that awful program back into my mind. So Open Court was being used across the district, which was scripted, which really was founded in not necessarily raising achievement long-term and conceptualization of learning. So that being said, what we took a look at for multiple years, for basically 3 years, was we have 18 certificated full-time positions that are pulling students out multiple times during the day. And how can we better build capacity? Knowing that we were in a time where we were going to have to reduce the budget. We gave raises for many years in a row. You can't give raises for many years in a row without reducing your budget in some manner or tightening in other areas. So we looked at positions outside of the classroom and tried to change the manner of work that they were doing for a long-term solution. And so that's how guided reading got introduced. We had some teachers who said, guided reading, Julie Webb is like a jewel. And I don't know Julie Webb, but she was brought in on request of teachers to teach them guided reading. And she has been our trainer for all teachers who are going to implement guided reading in the classroom and receive those leveled readers to implement into the classroom as a means of daily intervention and to build capacity within the classroom versus pulling out, knowing that any school district at this point having that pull-out kind of reading program we know is not working. So that being said, that's where we're doing it. And our instructional coaches are trained in guided reading. They did it before becoming an instructional coach. And, our focus next year for our coaches is truly coaching on guided reading, making sure that it's implemented with fidelity and support, and also, of course, the units of study through our standards-aligned curriculum and instruction. So that's how the inception of guided reading came about. It's to build our own capacity, knowing that we were going to get lean in future years, and it built capacity within the classroom itself.
Okay, so would it then be safe to say then that guided reading is the intervention program, whereas Alexia is the reading program? And they kind of
they're both intervention. They're both intervention. Now, guided reading is specifically targeted for the primary grades to intentionally address direct instruction to very small groups of students and immediately get through that. Alexia is like the partner if this is what a small group of other students that are not doing guided reading could be doing while the teacher is working with the guided reading.
Right, so they almost kind of work hand in hand.
They can be, yeah. So they're very leveled based. Yeah.
So then could we say the same thing then for the other two? The fifth tutoring and the blended learning? Are those kind of work in that same?
I would not say that.
Yeah, but probably not because they're older grades.
I would say those could be They do different things.
Okay.
So FEV tutoring is more to support, is kind of an intervention program in itself, whereas the blended learning, Edgenuity, Fuel Ed, that's more like taking a course online. So it's not necessarily for intervention.
Okay.
So FEV tutoring is more directed toward intervention is how we use it.
Okay, so, because my only concern is I just don't want to make, I just want to be certain that we're not duplicating our efforts with multiple programs.
That's a great question. The only two programs up there that are duplicating are Edgenuity and Fuel Ed. And that's why this year we're going through a process. We have a task force set up to evaluate these programs and some other ones to see which platform we want to use more universally.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, especially because when we look at the cost of it, I mean, we have programs that are duplicating themselves, duplicating each other, and then we should be able to make a decision between one versus the other, and
Correct, and that's why you see the costs are a little different on some of these programs than others, because some of them are kind of like, okay, let's see how this works, and kind of giving us a little bit of a view of maybe what that might be better. The FEV tutoring, I should have pointed out earlier also, it's the way you pay for it is by hours. So you're not getting a site license like you do for those other ones that say, okay, you can have this many users per building or whatever. This one is basically saying you can have as many people use this as you want by hours. So basically they're doing it by hours. So if you're using it quite a bit, then it's going to cost more.
Gotcha. Okay.
Can I make a point?
Yeah, absolutely.
For clarification, I just want to make sure I have this right, because often the term intervention is seen as maybe filling in the gaps for a student.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to make sure maybe we're using it in the same way that guided reading is not a program, but it's strategies for all kids. So it's your teaching that you're doing with all kids. So that like tier 1. And then Alexia could be tier 1 if, as you were talking about earlier, everyone's doing it, or it could be tier 2 for those kids that need more. But I think that's where where Sunday is then the more specific, where kids really need even more targeted.
Well, Sunday's primarily for
Yeah, so tier
dyslexia.
3, yeah, so it would be the highest needs kids.
But it
So
can
just
be
to
used
give
for
an
general ed
idea
as
that-
well. It can be used that, although that's not necessarily
Sure, but targeted,
specific.
that's
Yes,
targeted
correct.
intervention versus teaching to all students, which is guided reading.
As a parent
So
whose
just-
child had both,
And
but
Lexia can be all.
that's exactly right. It's not because she was falling behind, it's just a strategy to improve her learning and her passion. So that's, as described, that's exactly how my students experience.
So I wanted to also comment on Board Member Kirby Gonzalez's comments, because that's how I've seen it used. I've seen both Lexia and guided reading in a primary classroom be used. Both of those are used for all students. Both of those are used for all students, but they do plug gaps, but they're used for all students because, again, it's about zone of proximal growth. All students, even if you're a high reader, we're going to want to see improvement, right? So just
But my
kind of
daughter
keep
has
that
a
in mind.
perfect score now.
Yes, your daughter had a perfect score. I heard. Yeah, so, yes. But Sunday is more targeted, so I would definitely agree with that description.
Got it. Okay.
Where do we go from there?
Big part of right now is evaluating these programs and seeing how effective they are. We definitely, to your point, President Jackson, we definitely don't want to have dual things out there. We want to be efficient and have the best products that work for our students. And that is one reason why we didn't just go all in on FEV tutoring. We wanted to see how it worked at different levels because we don't want to have this big pricey item given the importance of budgets and their impact. So we wanted to take a look at it right now and get some good input from teachers.
Yeah. And I'm guessing in some cases you'll never get away from in-person tutoring, right? So
No.
it's the same blended model of tutoring after school, Title I, where there's a person, actually teachers providing the intervention.
It's done at all sites.
Same tool.
Yeah.
I appreciate the kind of media, if you will, of supporting our students.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Board discussion number 6, Facilities Master Plan, River City High School, Yolo High School, and Q&A for underutilized sites.
Good evening, trustees and community, colleagues. I can't tell you how pleased I am to tell you this is the last evening of presentation of the Facilities Master Plan. It has been an interesting discussion, and tonight is the last sections that we're going over individually during informational board meeting item. After tonight, we will be asking the board to take some action by formally adopting the plan as well as the priorities that they would like to state, and giving staff direction because we're going to need quite a lead time, particularly on underutilized sites, which is one of the topics of discussion this evening. So we do have a facilities subcommittee meeting after tonight's board meeting, and before we will be bringing it back till the end of April to ask for further direction and adoption. Okay, so just sort of contextually where we are. The sections that we're looking at this evening are specifically River City High School, and then underutilized sites, which encompasses a whole bunch of sites and does include a subsection in the master plan on all of those different sites, some in more detail than others because some of them are vacant property, whereas others are actual structures that still exist being utilized from one degree to another, depending upon the actual site. So we'll start with one of the ones that's easiest, and that is River City High School. It follows the same format as the other plans that we've looked at so far. A good assessment of the school, developed a good maintenance plan. The largest proposed change, depending upon the priorities that the board would choose, would be the construction of a district-wide visual and performing arts center. Of course, that is something that was part of the original plan and then could not be afforded because of all of the different issues with construction when they built the site. That demand from the community is still very high. It is not it's not what I would call a vocal minority. It is a consistent request of we want this not just from those parents that have kids in the system, but from community members at large who just feel that that's a natural, needed place of gathering for the community at large, not just for those that have kids in the school district. So be that as it may, that is something that showed up very prominently and consistently, something I'm sure none of you are surprised by. That's really the biggest issue that's identified with the River City High School plan. There are some other minor things that you can see there that are called out in different priorities. And then the section that I want to spend the most time on this evening is really getting a larger understanding of what can a school district do with its underutilized sites or properties. And that is spelled out in section 2.12. And there are a whole bunch of different options that are listed in that section. You might not be aware of all of the different assets throughout the district, particularly those that are covered by existing MOUs, as well as utilization. And the different legal options are laid out in that section. And of course, we can discuss any of those this evening that the board would like more information on. And that, like I said, is going to be discussed in more detail at the facilities subcommittee. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would just like to jump back to River City for a second, and you touched on it with the,
sure.
The performing arts complex. While it is under VAPA, I'm sort of viewing this more as a campus equity type issue, as we're starting to see kids from emerging, band programs and art programs at some of our schools that have never had, the ability to perform in a band or orchestra or anything like that. And then they start to come to the high school in kind of a, more unified way. They now have the opportunity to play in these, larger scale music programs, but they don't have a place to play. So they don't really have a large place to put on a performance. I think this is an opportunity for us to at least say that we value that, and this is something that I would recommend we would move up to a priority, because we had talked about, in terms of our campus equity, if we were to do a large-scale bond, we would basically only have enough funds to address, we'd only have enough funds to address campus equity items, because there was just not enough under the $250 million of needs in 2020 that are addressed in this facilities master plan. The maximum we could get from a bond at that time would have been 150, but since Prop 13 failed, it's not even that high now, correct?
Not necessarily. Your AVA will still support a large bond, as illustrated in the master plan.
Right.
So that is a possibility, but
when I did the math on all the campus equity costs, it was closing in on over $150 million just for campus equity.
No, 76.
76?
76 in current dollars.
So was
correct.
it both campus equity and VAPA then that was combined for over 150?
Yeah, so what I pointed out earlier is that basically, if you went for a maximum bond authority, even with maximum bond authority, you couldn't say, we want all five, Chris. That just doesn't work, because you're right, because there's over $250 million of projects here. So if you did the maximum, you would have to start, that's why we need a priority list set. So if, for example, if they went in the order that they were presented in the plan, equity being number one and VAPA number two, then the maximum bond authority would cover those two. Might it cover any more with some grant funding that we get in addition of maybe part of a little bit of three? Possibly, but for sure it would cover one and two. And maybe part of another one depending upon how expensive it is.
It would cover all identified in both?
In present dollars, yeah. Now it depends on how quickly we get it done, escalation, all that stuff.
There goes the question that I was
Sorry,
raising.
stuff wasn't a very technical.
No. It's a good question. So I think that, again, we'll kick it back to the facilities folks and when you have the conversation. But my understanding is when I was the backup to the backup to the backup to the backup, is that the bond capacity would cover both, at least, if not, more of the 1 and 2 equity and VAP.
Only if we did the 150
Correct,
million.
but that's a decision yet to be made, right? How much we go up.
Yes, the illustration was all done with maximum capacity and current dollars, which is a bit of a puzzle.
Yeah. And so I would imagine that those are still our 1 and 2. And then when we get to the bond conversation, that could change based on polling and everything else. But I'm still at 1 and 2. I know, but with that said, with River City, there's been a lot of comments from this board about replacing the speakers on the football field. So perhaps that's something that we could throw in if it was part, if that third extra on that campus.
Well, also the gym, too.
And the gym. So just something to consider to look at. And I don't know how much that would cost, but I would imagine that's not millions of dollars. So let me just put
I learned
that
a
out
long
there.
time ago not to just throw out numbers for capital projects, because I'm always wrong. So I would have to go get a professional opinion.
Well,
and it's always more.
Talking about
Yeah, it is. It's more than $1 million?
It's always more than whatever I think it's going to be.
Gotcha. So, but I would imagine it not to be significant. So I'm going to throw that in there because we've had lots of comments from this board as well as the public about replacing those systems.
Now, my question in that regard, though, too, is that I would hope that some of these things would be things that we could possibly split the cost of that.
Bad joke, President Jackson. Bad joke.
Just checking.
I was waiting for the March Madness joke, and no one made it.
Are there any of these projects related to River City, and particularly things like the gym, Performing Arts Center, that we could possibly even come to some sort of a joint agreement with the city to help kind of get those things accomplished?
That would be your that would be your decision.
What do you mean that would be our decision?
Well, if you wanted me to investigate that, that's certainly something I could investigate. If you want me to give you a likelihood of success off the top of my head, it would be fairly low. But that certainly could be your directive, is to explore those opportunities. I would, you know, there's a joint project on that campus that we are already carrying around that has quite a bit of history attached to it.
Right.
We do joint MOUs, certainly, that I think could be more mutually beneficial to both parties.
Right.
But as far as facilities and construction, I think that would be complicated.
Or not, or maybe not even facilities and construction, but even facility upgrades or facility improvements in terms of things with relating to the gym and.
Like the one that we just did that you attended on the district's behalf. So that was an example of one that we could do because we were sharing that space.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I have in mind. So, like, for example, on the for the future-ready classrooms, F20, improve gym acoustics and provide AV upgrades.
Oh, wait, that's under equity. Oh, never mind. That was already our priority. Never mind.
You know, that's to me that's something that should be able to. That could be something that could be a split cost because, since we just finished up basketball season.
So all of those things are actually already defined by the MOU that we have with the city. So you'll see more of those types of things coming. Right now, we're working on redoing the solar heater for the pool to save on gas costs. We're working on lighting for the tennis courts, all of those things that we do in joint with the city, things I don't bring to you.
Gotcha.
They're covered by the MOU. I make sure that we get the best out of it that we can.
Right.
And we've actually made a lot of progress in the past couple of years on items like that, the gym floor, things like that. But as far as moving forward, I think that both parties have learned that the more definition that we have before we go in, the better it works afterwards.
Right.
Yeah.
I apologize.
I was going to say, even in with the Performing Arts Center that desperately needs to be done, that's, now granted, it may not be the easiest thing to get done, but I would hope that there would be some way that we could come to some sort of a mutual agreement between the city and the district to kind of.
So, I mean, this is kind of future. So, one, I apologize because the map is different from the funding side because the AV, it was in future ready classroom, but in the funding, it's in equity. So I apologize for the confusion. So it was already in there. So just want to be clear that was already noted. So I think that we have been in some discussions about VAPA and just wondering whether or not there are arts councils, if we partner with the city and other folks, that we could get some support with developing that, maybe. But I think that's a future conversation when we have designs and all those things. So, like that opportunity, when you have a collaborator with that would probably be more likely from arts councils. But I don't know.
Well, I'm just posing the question because to me, I would like to, for my own curiosity and maybe for folks watching, is that a possibility to do a joint use city private district type partnership type deal?
Anything's possible, sure. Yeah. Well, what you're doing is you're asking me to speculate on the spot outside of the scope of what we've prepared. Have I worked on projects like that? Absolutely. Right? Are projects like that going forward? Absolutely. Is that something that's in here that's prepared for presentation discussion? Absolutely not.
No, not yet. I just wanted to know if that's a possibility. And so, yeah.
Any municipality and school district in Oregon can certainly collaborate with one another. We have done a lot of that with parks. We have a lot more plans with parks because they've been the ones that seem to be more in that collaborative space. Have there been other organizations that have outreach to the school district to do that? No, I think that a lot of folks typically sort of wait to see what the school will provide.
Okay. My thoughts are thinking back to the last bond. We move forward with our language and what was needed, and then also being pursued for that. That's a little different than what we're talking about here. Were grants for Bright and CTE grants, and so that work was happening over here as this was still going forward, and then it was great because extra money came in that helped with us for grants. So when I think about that here, I think about it as actually maybe not your role because you're doing all these pieces, but on the side conversations. I heard Natomas Charter has a great theater, and it's new theater, and that was all fundraised. Now, granted, they had some very, lucky donors for them, but there are ways, I think, on the outside. And so for anybody watching, as we said, groups that come in, a lot of people in the community are very motivated in how they can come help. I also serve on West Sac Play. We saw a need in the community, and we were able to raise $50,000 that we just said, here's a check for. So it took us a while, but there are ways, I think, that we can pursue those conversations maybe on the side as this moves forward.
Yeah.
It just frees up money for other projects.
Yeah. Trustee Alco?
And I like that idea because I was thinking the very same thing that board member Kirby Gonzalez was. We have an Indian museum that's going to be coming in, and I know that the tribes have substantial revenue. That may be something that could be discussed as the Indian Museum comes in. They have been very generous, throughout California, and that would be something that I would like to pursue. Maybe a conversation as the Indian Museum comes in, because it is part of our community.
So I am wondering if we can talk about the actual facilities and plans and approve those priorities, and then also think about, because we will have to have the next conversation with pulling about funding and kind of exploring those, giving staff direction on the things that we want to do after we get that conversation going. But for the purpose of this, wanting to make sure that we're all on the same page of the priorities.
Yeah.
Of the structure and how that, and then talk about absolutely whether or not the tribes and or arts councils or city, parallel track, if you will, for funding some of these projects. It's not necessarily a now conversation. I feel like it's a later conversation.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not facilitating from here. But so Riverside, does that seem like the priorities 1 and 2 still, equity and VAPA?
Yeah.
Unless,
Yeah. No, I don't think the priorities, I don't think have ever really changed, so.
we had, we had other offshoots, so it's
Yeah.
opportunity.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Vice President Posada. Sorry.
You almost had a
Director
Moisage moment.
Right.
A Director Moisage moment.
I was wondering if maybe it would be wise for us to table the underutilized sites discussion until the committee had a chance to talk about it, which is coming up next week anyway.
Is there for a reason? Is there urgency around it, or can we wait?
No, there's no specific urgency. The question has come up from the board about what was the intent in describing the amount of work that really needed to be done for non-student sites throughout the district. And essentially what this does is it's necessary to read through and really understand what are the options that the board has with properties. And so when it says underutilized sites, it's a little misleading. Sites can just be vacant pieces of land, right? So it's just a plot of land. But what that essentially leads you to be able to do is what are your options to be able to get money outside of the bond to do some of the work that would not be bond appropriate? In other words, it's not going to go into constructing a school site or serve students, but we still have needs that require money throughout the district that probably aren't going to be supported by a bond. I wouldn't recommend being supported by a bond.
We actually do have a couple of public comments. Ms. Danny Langford.
I just, again, would like to go on the record and express my disappointment. And I know because of parents and community members that have reached out to me that there was never a facilities master plan meeting held at actually River City High School, our largest campus. I don't think it gives a fair reflection on what family and parents really wanted to express because they've expressed it to me. Not that that goes anywhere when I come here and try to express it to you guys. But I think it's unfair because those meetings were not, they were grouped into the one that was held at Bright Campus, and on the advertisement of it, it strictly said Washington Middle School College looked like was the school that was going to be done for the Facebook posts and what I saw in the district, and I'm not alone. And as you guys know, Pat Flint and I are both pretty tuned in to what goes on in the district and about meetings. And we purposely didn't go that night because neither one of us were feeling well. And then later found out, like a month later, that River City was added to it. It made no sense. There was never a meeting held at River City High School campus. And I think that's not fair to the parents or the community members that live around there and that pay for the taxes of this entire district. Thank you.
Rhonda Pope Flores.
Sorry, I'm short.
There's a button. You can lower it.
Oh, sorry.
Whoops, I'm
Oops,
sorry.
Oh, there you go.
It gets
wow,
short.
It's short people. That's awesome. Great. That's great. So I heard a mention of tribes. Well, first, I grew up here. I grew up on Anna Street. Grew up here all my life. My family grew up here. My Portuguese side. My Indian side comes from Amador County. I'm the chairwoman for my tribe, Buena Vista Rancheria. I'm involved in the, I'm actually looking to try to be nominated to be on that board for the Indian Museum. I've followed it for many years. Clarification, are you looking for funding for the performing arts? Or what was, I missed the full statement that was being made. So that was the one thing I wanted to ask. And then just an observation. So even though I think it's really great that you're thinking about, performing arts and things like that, a girl that grew up on that side of the tracks, I'm going to say that the perception, and I don't live here anymore. I still own a home here, and I still pay taxes here. Grew up on that side of the tracks, we always felt neglected. We always felt like the redheaded stepchild. We always felt like, and if there's anybody redheaded here, I apologize. It's just, we always felt like not enough money went on that side of the tracks. I will tell you personally, when our pools got demolished and we didn't even know about it, like, I drove by one day and I seen the pools, and yes, it happened a long time ago. I'm carrying a torch, okay? I swam in those pools, and so I guess my statement is I wish that you would pay attention to that side of the tracks a little bit more, Broderick and Bright. There's a lot of great things going on this side. There's a lot of development that's been going on the Reed Avenue side, and the new houses, $1 million houses. I crack up because I lived on Anna Street, little flat top roof. And then I see right behind, you look over, and $1 million houses. Where's the revenue going? What's going on with that revenue? How come it's not staying on that side of the track? So before you go and dip into new, adventures, make sure we're taking care of everybody first, is what I would recommend. And then if there was a question about the money, so would tribes donate? Was that for the Performing Arts Center, or did that have to do with the museum? Okay. So, yeah, just to answer your question, you'd have to approach tribes individually about that. Each tribe is their own federally recognized tribe with their own government. I know Yochidi, he does a ton of stuff here in Yolo County already. So that's my answer to that inquiry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I redirect?
Yes.
So, I know that this is the last facilities meeting, so I just want to be clear to the public and just be consistent with when we talk about equity, majority of the bond would be going to the less resource size. I don't like necessarily saying that side of the tracks, but in previous discussions, majority of the money of the bonds would actually go to Brighton, Broderick, and Riverbank, Westfield,
And so I just want to acknowledge that. So just want to be clear that it's just, just happens to be the last facility meeting that we're having, and it happens to be about the high school. So, but previous meetings have been about the schools that haven't been touched since the 60s on the north side of West Sacramento.
Yeah. And if you look at the facility, I'm sorry, go ahead. Kristen.
No, and that's,
I was saying.
and so that we have, when we talk about equity specifically, we're talking about making sure that resources are going to historically like less resource schools and communities. So I just want to reiterate that and just kind of redirect a little bit that this just happens to be the last school, but we all have been consistently saying that older neighborhoods need most of our love and our bonds.
Mm-hmm.
And I so appreciate those comments. I think that that is spot on, and I want to make it clear that our last bond that we were very passionate about, the same thing happened, right? If you haven't visited Bright Cafe, go visit, and the CTE, the work that is done there, the most of that money went to the Bright facility too. So I just want to make that clear, and I know that they're very true and very real comments that are made, but I want to make sure that we share that.
And if you have the opportunity to look at the facility master plan and look at what the proposals are for, Elkhorn, Riverbank, and Westfield, you will clearly see that the majority of the building and the development is at those schools. So while there is campus improvements at virtually all the schools, those are receiving the lion's share of the proposed renovations. So they will all be getting a serious facelift if we can pass a bond.
Thank you for that. Okay. All right. And
so there was a offer to table or the request to table the underutilized. I'm fine unless there's some urgency behind it to wait.
Likewise.
For the facilities subcommittee to discuss and come back.
Make a motion. Do we need a?
No.
Okay. Perfect.
So you will apparently will be coming back, so Chris. So it's not your last.
Right. All right. Anything else we're into? All right. Consent agenda. Yay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Trustee Alcala, seconded by Vice President Pizzati. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Key action items. There are no action items for this part of the agenda. How about that? Board governance. Q1. Resolution number 1920-13, proclaiming April 10th, 2020 as Dolores Huerta Day.
Oh, Jackie, yes, that's fine.
Yes.
Go ahead,
Trustee Wong, would you like to read the resolution?
So yes, I would be happy and proud to read the resolution as she's just a wonderful woman. So resolution number 1920-13, proclaiming April 10th, 2020 as Dolores Huerta Day. Whereas on July 18th, 2018, Governor Jerry Brown signed Assembly Bill 2644, introduced by Assembly Member Eloise Gomez-Reyes of Assembly District 47, designating April 10th as Dolores Huerta Day, making civil rights leader and community organizer Dolores Huerta the first and only living person to hold this honor. And whereas Assembly Bill 2644 adds Section 37222.20 to the Education Code, stating on Dolores Huerta Day, all public schools and educational institutions are encouraged to conduct exercises remembering the life of Dolores Huerta, recognizing her accomplishments, and familiarizing pupils with the contributions she made to the state. And whereas Dolores Clara Fernandez Huerta was born on April 10, 1930 in Dawson, New Mexico, the daughter of Juan and Alexia Fernandez, and whereas Dolores Huerta became a school teacher in Stockton, California, and became conscious of the need for economic justice through seeing her students come to school barefoot and hungry, and whereas during the 1950s, Huerta met legendary community organizer Fred Ross Sr. and found her calling as an organizer, serving the leadership of the Stockton Community Service Organization, during which time she set up voter registration drives, pressed local governments for barrio improvements, and founded the Agricultural Workers Association, AWA,
And whereas Dolores Huerta famed lobbying efforts were crucial in securing aid for families with dependent children and disability insurance for farm workers in the state of California in 1963. And whereas Dolores Huerta is the most prominent Mexican-American female labor leader in the United States, is the co-founder with Cesar Chavez of the United Farm Workers of America. And whereas for over 60 years, beginning in the 1960s, Huerta lobbied in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., and she continues to do so, organized field strikes, directed UFW boycotts, led farm worker campaigns for political candidates, negotiated the first UFW labor contracts, and has played a major role in the American Civil Rights Movement. And whereas in 2002, Dolores Huerta founded the Dolores Huerta Foundation, which recruits and empowers grassroots leaders in low-income communities to attain social justice by organizing volunteer organization called Vecinos Unidos to work on issues in education, health, the environment, civic engagement, and economic development. And whereas Dolores Huerta has received numerous awards, among them the California State Senate's Outstanding Labor Leader Award, the ACLU Roger Baldwin Medal of Liberty Award, the Eugene V. Debs Foundation Outstanding American Award, the Ellis Island Medal of Freedom Award, the Consumers Union Trumpeters Award, Miss Magazine's Woman of the Year for 1998, the Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award from President Clinton in 1998, and most recently, the top 100 most influential women in Time magazine. And whereas Dolores Huerta was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame in 1993 and served on the Board of Regents for the University of California, and whereas in 2012, President Obama presented Huerta the Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian award in the United States, whereas her rallying cry of "Si se puede" continues to call us to fight for the changes our communities need to thrive, and whereas young learners will benefit from having the opportunity to learn more about the leader for social justice and civil rights, empowering them to fight for fair representation, voting rights, and equitable education. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Washington Unified School District does hereby adopt the resolution to honor a national civil rights leader and labor leader in America on or around April 10th, Dolores Huerta Day. Be it further resolved that all public schools in the Washington Unified School District are encouraged to teach about the life and struggles of Dolores Huerta and to conduct celebrations honoring the life of Dolores Huerta as a powerful force of social justice and empowerment for all. So approved, passed, and adopted at a regular meeting of the governing body of the Washington Unified School District on this 12th day of March 20th by vote. And if I can send a message from her, she appreciates the fact that we actually nominated, we are making this resolution for her today.
Well, I will move to approve the resolution.
Second.
Since it is a resolution, it's a roll call vote. Trustee Alcala?
Aye.
Trustee Wong?
Aye.
Clerk Kirby Gonzalez?
Aye.
Vice President Posada? And I also vote aye. Motion is passed unanimously. All right. Board comments.
I feel like I want to do the cup.
Yeah, okay. Let's start with you, Trustee Wong.
There isn't a whole lot to kind of update on. I was able to join Superintendent Luna and our cabinet at the Principal for a Day celebration at Bright, which is always a lovely event. Having our community leaders who are invested in West Sacramento come and see what our schools are up to, always really great things. Really, I really appreciate the fact that you've actually established this in the community as something that people look forward to. And so appreciate that, thank you.
Trustee Alcala.
Thank you. I want to begin by thanking the the parents and the community members that reach out to me and to the rest of the board. We really do appreciate when you come and share your concerns and your recommendations. I want to address that safety is a big concern for all of us. And I know that right now, one of the concerns that was raised by a member of our community was how important it is for us to have some sort of accountability and that there should be consequences when the safety of the students is maybe jeopardized by another student, and how the teachers need to be supported in this. And I know that this is something that we will definitely address immediately, perhaps even at our next board meeting. So I don't want people thinking that we're not listening, and I don't want them ever to feel that they're broken records. You know, we really do want to hear from you. That's the only way that we can make this school district, you know, the wonderful district that we see it becoming. And I just want to make sure that everyone does understand that, you know. Also, we've had, here we go. One of the parents that was very concerned, I want you to know that we really do appreciate when we get these. The parent who had her concerns weren't just her concerns. There are, I think, like over 100 signatures that she collected with phone numbers and all. So we're very aware of the concerns that all parents have. And I just wanted to state that we want to continue hearing from you. Thank you.
Clerk Kerwin Gonzalez.
Thank you. It feels like the last 2 days have been 2 weeks, so I can't even remember what we were doing. But I did want to, I wasn't able to say anything last time, and I would like to acknowledge when the resolutions are in this room, they're powerful, you know, they feel good. And then what feels even better is when we go out into our schools and then we see them in action. And so the last resolution we had Black History Month, and I was really grateful to see some of the work that was being done across our campuses to talk about not just those who have fought back against oppression, which is very important, also celebrating people in their everyday lives and leaders that we have current day as well. And I just feel like our schools, it was a noticeable change maybe from some years past in terms of seeing some of these celebrations. And I hope that the same is true for Dolores Huerta, that our kids are talking about her in their classrooms as well. Because it's important that we pass these resolutions and we want to see that work is being done. So I want to give a big shout out to everybody who works hard in our schools for those. And a thought came to me. So in terms of also the feedback, in some ways, our substitutes know our schools differently, in a different lens than others do, don't they? Because they are visiting all different campuses and they see procedures at one school and then they go to another school and see those procedures. So I think that they are a wealth of knowledge. And so a thought being maybe we have an exit ticket for our visiting teachers, for our substitutes, as well as for our substitutes in all areas, to give some feedback when they leave about what they see, how it went, and maybe what can be improved. I think that that's an important thing to hear because we don't want to hear that visiting teachers don't want to be at a site, and we need some feedback, I think. So I would recommend that. And that is all for me tonight. And I just want to thank everyone for, again, maybe we'll be all hands on deck still and be ready for a meeting if we need to have one, and everyone working hard to keep our kids, our staff, and our community safe.
Thank you. Vice President Posada.
Yeah, thank you. I'll keep my comments very brief. I want to say thank you to Trustee Wong for attending at Bright for the Principal for a Day. I was scheduled to go, and then I ended up having an emergency client representation and was not able to make it. However, I'm making that
Always
up.
a good backup.
Thanks, appreciate it. You got our backup. However, I am going to take a tour of Westfield tomorrow and go read to a class. They were supposed to have an award ceremony tomorrow, but unfortunately they're canceling all assemblies, and rightfully so. So I won't be able to attend that, but I will be able to at least take a tour and see all the great things that the school is doing, and go read to some kiddos. That's always a plus. And I think we've I think at least for me, I've asked all the possible questions that I think I can ask on COVID-19, and I've been, the labor union that I represent they're nurses, they're psychiatric nurses. So I've been in meetings about this for the last probably week or so. And I can tell you that we here at the school district are doing more than our state facilities are. So, I mean, that should tell you something, that we are protecting ourselves greater than what we are doing at some state hospitals. So I would just like everybody to understand that when we take precautionary measures, we were taking a lot of precautionary measures. And I would like to, again, recognize the cabinet and the staff, superintendent, and especially Yorgos for getting those communications out and them being so full of information. They're very helpful, and they help us pass on the information to our contacts. So I'm really grateful. So with that, thank you and good night.
Well, I'll just echo some of the sentiments that were already expressed. And one thing I want to make perfectly clear to folks who are thinking about or may come in front of the board, that don't ever feel like you have to justify speaking in front of this board. You have every right to do so. At no point in time are you a nuisance or unwanted. Your input and your feedback is extremely valuable to the things that we're trying to accomplish here in this district. And so don't feel like you have to, that there's anything, it's not an inconvenience on your part when you come here and speak to us. I actually really appreciate it and look forward to the comments that people make here at this meeting. So you're always welcome. And I encourage even more people, as many people as possible, to participate and get involved, because really that's really the only way that we have to know and to get a real good feel of the pulse of the community is when people come and express us, because we all have our separate lives, and we do as much as we can with in the schools than the time that we have. But the real way we get an opportunity to be able to see what's going on is when parents and community members come in and let us know exactly what they're thinking, what they're seeing, what they're feeling, things like that. So it's very, very valuable information that you provide us. Also, I would like to thank Superintendent Luna and the cabinet for, again, for the work that you guys have been doing in terms of getting the information out and trying to keep the community involved and aware of the things that are taking place when it comes to our preparation for dealing with this COVID-19. And I can honestly say I'm very pleased and proud of the plan that we have in place. I think a lot of times people don't necessarily understand the plan that we have in place. A lot of times it just seems like, well, we're just kind of flying off the cuff. But please rest assured that there is a plan in place, and we will follow that plan. And I think one of the things that kind of make me even prouder of the fact that we have a plan, that we're following our plan, is when, not to kick a dead horse, but when a neighboring district all of a sudden comes up with things because, oh, well, we think we need to do this. Well, you know what? When you have a plan in place and you follow your plan, you stick to your plan, you don't necessarily have to do things in the middle of a week in order to get things in order. Reason why we're not taking time off is because we've had a plan in place for a couple weeks now that has been followed as far as cleaning and desanitizing our schools and putting things like hand sanitizers in the classrooms and providing soap in all the bathrooms at all times. And so we don't necessarily have a need to be able to have to take time off for that. And so for me, that makes me proud of the work that we're doing, that, hey, we know we are prepared. And so that if things do get worse, if things get, we are prepared to be able to tackle those things as they come head on. And then lastly, I'll just comment that a couple weeks ago, I want to thank Principal Rodriguez over at Riverbank, MOT for coming out, and the Wetzel family for coming out and helping out with that the fifth Saturday thing that we did. We were able to put in a nice little seating area for the middle grade kids, which was, it was cool because Principal Rodriguez sent me a picture of it that following Monday with all the kids first thing in the morning hanging out in the new space that we were able to create for them. And, and we weren't able to get everything done that we wanted to, but in the time that we have, and we got got quite a bit done. And it's the thing that makes me proud is that it kind of sparked something in her where she was like, you know what? We didn't get everything done, but I think we can do this with our community as a back to school night or back to school event coming next school year. So it was just able just to spark those ideas of how you can get the community involved and get the community to buy back into their neighborhood school, which I think is, it's just, that pays huge dividends. So with that, thank you for everyone who came out to support that. We look forward to continuing that and getting it to the next event that we have, whenever wherever that will be. And then with that, that is all I have. Do I have a motion? Oh, that's right. Future board agenda. I forgot. I have one written down for that. Future board agenda items. S1, policy updates, dress code and administrative regulations for Yolo Education Center. March 2020, S2, Local Control Accountability Plan, Update and Local Indicators, March 26, 2020. S3, Moms Demand Action Information Presentation requested to be determined. S4, Board Governance and Norms Review, April 16th, 2020. Are there any additional future board agenda items? I have one that I would like to add that has come to my mind. And that would be a policy one for kinder registration throughout the district. I think that's something that we need to make sure that we are all on the same page as far as how that should be handled at all of our schools across the district. So there's a uniformity in how that issue is
Just
dealt with.
point of discussion. Can you clarify what you mean by that?
Well, I think, okay, well, speaking as someone who has just gone through it, who just went through it, for years at Bridgeway, there was the issue with people camping out at night, lining up, and then a few years ago, Principal Chen said, we're done with that. Yeah, well, and then it was gone. Because now all of a sudden registration was was no longer first come, first served. It was to be random. However, then I think when parents this year went to go register, myself included, I waited in line just like everyone else. I got my number just like everyone else to enroll my youngest daughter in the kinder at Bridgeway. And then I get an email and I started getting emails and phone calls from parents the following days saying, well, wait a minute, we were just told that it didn't matter because as you registered, they were writing down the times that they took your registration. I'm just telling you what happened. And so parents asked, well, wait a minute, why are we recording the times? And so they were told, well, because that's how we're under the impression that was how the registration was to be taking place.
So I'm wondering whether or not that's a board discussion or whether or not that's a site-specific implementation issue.
Well, I don't.
Wondering because in terms of board governance, I'm trying to figure out, is this something you observed at all campuses, or is it? I'm just trying to understand if it's a Bridgeway issue.
No,
then
well, just for uniformity's sake, if that's something that's done, if random, and I don't know, maybe it is a Bridgeway issue, maybe because they have so many more registrations than others. Because I know I went to registration at Riverbank, and they didn't have that issue.
So I am wondering if an implementation.
Let me finish. And so the point being is that regardless of whether it's an issue at other sites right now, in case it ever becomes an issue at other sites, maybe it's already in place. Is there a policy that's already in place that says that the kinder registration is to be done at random, regardless of when children are registered on the day of? Because that was the issue.
So I think, well, for me, I'm wondering whether or not that's a practice issue versus a policy issue. That's why I want to make a distinction. It's we often don't get into the practice issue at the board in terms of our role as the board, right? So writing down times or lottery or all that, I feel that that's an implementation issue versus a policy issue that is part of our role.
Well, I don't know. That's
I'm glad. So that it's time to discuss. You're requesting to put it on the board. So I'm just trying to figure out whether or not it's appropriate for this to be discussed. if it's an implementation issue. Yeah.
I'm wondering if the board might allow me to provide information of how every school does their kinder registration, and then where it is in terms of, it wouldn't be a policy, it would be a regulation at most.
So would that be informational next time?
First, I think the board should have the information because it may be a moot point.
Yeah.
So let me get that information
Okay,
for the board.
that's fine.
Yeah, for every school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because like I said, I don't know if it's typical or if it's atypical or what the deal is.
So I'm wondering whether or not first we can do the staff can do an investigation, show what is our AR, and then we can discuss whether or not it needs to be revisited as a board issue. 'Cause
Yes, if
I'm
there's
not
an
sure.
AR, we definitely will
Then it
bring
might
it
be
to
an
the board
implementation.
because then it's part of the policies. If it's just a general practice, then we can definitely, no matter what, we're going to give you all that information. Yeah.
That's fine. What's that?
Well, I think the
Right.
direction to
So-
the staff is, what is our board policy? And then it very much could be an implementation. I just don't know, so why
Right,
don't we
and neither
do some
do I, and that's why
investigation?
I wanted to put it on
So I'm
there,
not
so
sure if it's a
just for
future board
discussion.
discussion, so why
Yeah.
can we get an email and then revisit whether or not it's an implementation issue versus a change in policy?
That's perfect. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Vice President Mazzati.
Second.
I was gonna say, I mean, if y'all want to stay, you
Trustee
can
Alcala
stay.
just looking.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Let's get out of here.